for trans people, they are such a small group of people in the United States, and they are having such a dramatic effect. So many people are freaking out about what's happening in the kids' classrooms, what's happening in their bathrooms, what's happening in locker rooms.
Do you think you were causing me positive energy when people were coming to my chats and saying like things about me, or like saying things about me in your comment sections about how I'm deluded or crazy? Or
sometime like we were just talking for me in chat, and your response was something that actually like kind of pissed me off. So you said,
what was it?
You said, thanks, but I'm very picky about the types of people that I collaborate with. And I was like,
remember. You're right.
Like, oh, I think I'm gonna go I'm gonna reach out to Brittany and see if she wants to chat. And I'm like, nah, don't even try. She's picky about the people she collaborates
with. Okay. It's like, I got so overwhelmed during that Destiny thing. I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? And I was like so confused.
He said this numerous times over the last couple of weeks. It's like, I'm exhausted right now, but I'm on here anyways because I'm addicted to this crap. And so here I am talking to you losers at like 1 in the morning. Morals are one of the things that we use as a marker for the chemistry that we're looking for, and same with like anything else that we prioritize. These are all going to come down to us looking for like the chemistry and compatibility is like the main two things that I think we're looking for.
Right, chemistry and compatibility. Because I was going to say, like, I feel like I have chemistry with everybody. Like, you know what I mean? I just feel like I've got good chemistry with most people I meet. Most people like me in general. Maybe not on the internet, but like in real life, I do fine. And even on the internet, like when people meet me in person, they're like, oh, Brittany's kind of fun. I was like, yeah. But like, that's the thing is like, chemistry doesn't seem that important to me because I seem to have it with most people. And I'm pretty high, like I got a high sex drive. So that's easy too. Like I find everyone attractive. Like everyone's kind of attractive to me if you're not like in the extremes of looks. Like everyone's kind of attractive to me. But the compatibility is what I think is so rare for people like me, where I'm like, man, you're so almost there. But like, oh, see this thing here? Like, I can't. Like, ABBA, I love ABBA, so attractive. But like, he's so conservative to my brain. But he's not. He's like, not that conservative, but he's like just enough conservative, right? And I'm on OnlyFans. Like, ABBA and I wouldn't make a good couple, right? Like, I need a sex-positive, progressive person. And that's what I found. But the ABBA isn't a bad person. I can't wait till ABBA finds his wife. Like, I'm so here for it. But it's not a person like me in my category. And so what I would encourage people to do is not settle for the handsome, charismatic, lovely man, because I think eventually it will erode in the relationship.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that makes sense that you see him as conservative. I think that lots of people from where they're at, they're going to kind of see people as more or
not
less
Republican
liberal.
Conservative, but you know, black conservative.
Well, and even the girl in the video, I disagreed with her. I do think that I do think that liberal men, like Democrat liberal men, are going to be more traditionally masculine most of the time. I do think it's becoming less and less common, and I do think that you're more likely to find that with conservative men because they value those traditional things more than liberal people do. But I do think it's still currently insanely common to find traditionally masculine liberal men. I am a traditional liberal conservative or a Democrat guy who will vote for Democrats every single time, and I've never watched anime in my entire life. I played football and basketball. Like I definitely I value those like traditional markers that people look for, and I look for those in women as well, and I enjoy that part of the game as well, and I think that those are things that are going to be like markers for chemistry and compatibility as well. And so those are, I disagreed with the girl. Somebody said to you last night that they have a love-hate relationship with you, and every time I review your stuff, I feel the same way, where like you say some things that are just so freaking based, and I'm like, yes, dude. Like, and I've talked about like people are like they get upset about your levels thing, that like, oh, she doesn't even understand introspection. I definitely think you understand introspection. As somebody who's had to change like almost every aspect of their personality in life, I definitely think you understand those things. So it was I like a lot of the things that you have to say, but when it comes to semantics, I start to get very frustrated.
Same, to be honest with you. That's why I get frustrated with Ab and Preach, who I adore. I'm just like, what are you saying? Like, what does this mean? And I think ultimately that's why I do like the word you. I know everyone gets triggered, but like I like the word bubble because I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. Like I live here where this word means this, and this word means this. Because again, it sounds like we're just having a different relationship with words. Like, how do my conservative parents agree? Like, again, they're so different from me, but we agree on what settling and compromise is even
Mhm.
though we're like in different bubbles. And it's because like I do take a lot of the good I got from religion and I take it with me and I'm like, cool, cool, cool. Like I'm going to utilize that tool and I'm going to utilize that way of speaking. I'm going to find someone who agrees on those terminologies. And again, where I want someone with like a shared reality. So I don't wake up one day and look at my partner and think, oh my God, I married a stranger. Because I actually did marry a stranger off the internet, guys. And so like there's this worry of like, oh my gosh, I want to make sure I know the consciousness that is this person that I'm sharing a life with, right? And I think you can learn that in many ways. I think you can expedite the process when you're both very strong characters and you both know yourself. So, like my brother courted his wife for 3 months, got married after 6. My parents, same timeline, and me and my partner, well, we got married after a year of dating, but we had made the decision about 6 months in. 3 to 6 months in, we had different levels of saying yes. So we said yes multiple times to confirm after meeting each other's families. But at the 6 month mark, we made the decision to get married and be with each other 100%, like no doubts. And now a year later, we just got married. And so for us, we could expedite that dating process. One, because we're older. Two, because we've lived a life. And three, because we spent our whole life learning who we are as people. Like, who am I? And who am I going to give myself to? And who's going to give themselves to me? And I think you're right. Most people are not having these conversations with themselves, which is why I think most people are twos.
That's fair. That's the part that I don't like so much is putting it. You say it's not a hierarchy. I think you're putting it into a hierarchy. But yes, I think that like the like numbering part is the part I disagree with. But yes, when
Yeah.
it comes to like what introspection is and like the way that you talk about each level, I agree with all of that so much and the that sort of stuff. And I yeah, I definitely, for the most part, when I started my show, it was because I couldn't find people to talk to about the stuff that I
Totally.
wanted to talk to about. I wanted to
Totally.
like dig deep into into certain topics and really like have a good understanding of them, but I couldn't
Mm,
unless I talked to people about it. Like I could go read something, but I'm not sure
yeah.
if I'm questioning the right things. I'm not sure if I'm like thinking about it the way that I should be. And so I have to have like a debate or a conversation about it in order to think that I actually understand it. So the entire reason I
Totally.
started this show was so that I could like, if I just reached out to somebody on Facebook and was like, "Hey, want to have a deep conversation about meta ethics?" They'd be like, what the hell? No, who
I,
are you?
Same. Like literally, I always joke that I used to send out a beacon where I was like, "Are you my person? Are you my person? Who can I talk to? I want to talk to other people who are interested." And the best place to get all those people around the world together is like the internet.
Hmm.
That's why I love my Discord. It's why I like my community because like we have so many international people. We have so many people all over the planet who are just like, "This is how I do things. How do you do things?" I'm like, "Oh, cool. This is how I do things. How do you do things?" And then I can't even tell you how many people have fallen in love through my Discord. Like my Discord does bring about a bunch of people who've spent their whole life being introspective and feeling very alone and feeling like, hey, like people are annoyed that I keep asking why. And I'm like, well, not this Discord. We want to know why until it hurts us. And then it helps that I grew up in a religious philosophy family. Like my parents are big on that. They're big readers. They're big like they allowed us to ask why, which is also the joke of why 5 of us turned out to be atheists. So, but they did encourage us to question. And so I think that I just grew up with like an up. Like I grew up with like a privilege, I guess, because my parents still let us read. I mean, even as a child, I was just like reading and consuming and so yeah, I think the internet is a great place for that. And I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, dude, I grew up in like very different. My dad was a
Mm.
pastor. We were like very, I keep wanting to say traditional, but that's not the word I'm looking for. Fundamental Christians,
Ah,
like
yeah,
very
yeah.
fundamentalist. My parents, the answer was always because I said so. If I was asking questions, and I was a very curious person, and always had a million questions about things and never got them, and that was like
Yeah.
insanely infuriating. And even like my sister, who is gay, is still a Christian. I
Interesting.
have another sister who can't leave her bed and also struggles with chronic pain and is still a Christian and is very liberal. Both of them are very liberal people, but also still very like at church every Sunday or watching church on the computer for one of them. But yeah, like my other two brothers are pastors now. Everybody thought I was going to be a pastor when I was older. Like it was I am the one. I've always been the black sheep, so I am the one who is not religious anymore.
If I may ask, like, are your parents disappointed that your sisters are liberal Christians?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so that is what I thought Kyla was so interesting about. I'm like, you're a liberal Christian. What's up with that? Like, how does that work, right? Because I grew up very strict Catholic, and still, like I said, my parents loved me, supported my wedding, gave me a gift, but like could not be there. And they call it, what do they call it? They're like, oh, I like that you're civilly unionized. So I was like, like they can't quite see it as like a marriage, right? Because it's not a sacrament. We were married in the government, like we were married at the courthouse.
Yeah.
So, but we love each other. I'm so glad that we could get to this point as a family. We're like, okay, like we're doing our best. This is the best where we could meet each other, right? But it's pretty good. It's not too bad. But yeah, like there's that disconnect. Like, that's what I'm saying. When you say you could date a Christian, I'm like, what am I imagining? I'm imagining a fundamentalist.
Did that cause like strife with you and your parents at all for like leaving religion and dating people who weren't religious?
I was the first kid. So we have 10 kids total. I'm the third oldest. 8 boys, 2 girls, and I was the first kid who lived at home to stop actively going to church. I turned 18 and I said, hey, I'm not going to church anymore. And that was allowed, but also like it was a big deal. And then at 19, I officially left the church. And I still love it. Like my homie's a priest. Like we talk about religion all the time. I love going to Bible study with people. If there's a good debate about to happen, I'm here for it. I love watching the Christians and the Catholics argue. Like I love that stuff. I think I'll always feel at home at the church. But at the same time, I think everybody knows that it is hard because like my borderline, according to my therapist, her best guess is that my borderline occurred because I was a gay kid, a queer kid, a bisexual, pansexual kid in a religious home, the first one to ever come out in the history of all my family. So when I came out, like family from Iraq was like calling us, being like, what the hell is going on? Why is Brittany posting videos on the internet that she's queer? And like it was a big deal. And so I think I pre-abandoned myself. And then I've always wanted to like get that approval from my parents that like I was good enough, even though I was queer. And so now after therapy and stuff, I not only have a better relationship with my borderline, but with my family and with everyone else. And I was able to give my family those tools to be like, hey, let's talk about how like we accidentally abandoned our kids because of religion. And it's actually made a big difference in our relationship. But yeah, it's a huge thing.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I like it. It was a big problem for my sisters and for my sister who was gay and coming out as gay, and then my other sister who's also liberal. Like they would get into fights with my parents pretty often. When I first started my show, I was pretty far right. Like I was like very far right, and I like always did everything extreme. So obviously like I was a criminal, heroin addict, like everything for me was always on extremes. So ending up as like a freaking centrist type person now is weird. But my parents are like very confused at how the hell like the three of us ended up vote. They were wealthy for a while and had like Republican parties where like big like Republican governor candidates were coming over, and and like they would have all sorts of like get-togethers with big wigs in the political world. And my dad was a huge PragerU fan my entire life, and like Rush Limbaugh and those sorts of guys.
Rush Limbaugh.
Really?
Yeah, and I've met Sean Hannity, I've met Glenn Beck. Yeah, you remember Snurdly? He used to answer the calls for Rush.
No.
When I was a conservative, I was in politics, and I had this goal of being a radio host in politics in the Republican bubble. And he read my book. I had a conservative book. Don't look it up. It's trash. It's the worst thing ever. It should be burned. But like I wrote a conservative book as a teenager, and like Rush's team read it and was like thinking about, like, should we give her a platform type thing? They didn't. Thank God. Like everything in hindsight is like a blessing that none of these conservatives ever like took me up. I think they could tell that I was going to be rebellious. But it was one of those things where yeah, like my parents have the connections your parents have, but with the religious people, like big people in the religious communities. That was our houses, doing the get-togethers, having them show up, like people being godparents, and you're just like, it's a weird bubble to leave because you're just changing everything. And also, I don't know about you, but like it's always going to feel like home for me, so sometimes I miss it. But
Mhm.
like I'm happiest in my own little space, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I the way that I hear liberal people talk about like Republicans and Christians is always very weird because I still almost think of them as like the people with the moral high ground all the time,
For
and
sure.
they obviously I disagree with them on almost everything, but I still
Hmm.
think of them that way because
Yeah.
that's just how I grew up, and that was the way that we thought of ourselves, and you know, the
Yeah.
fact that we knew what morals were and they were objective and everybody else was sinful and degenerate
Right.
and you know, those sorts of things. So I like it's funny to kind of look from the outside and still have those almost like cognitive dissonance that ties you back
Yeah.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's funny.
remember when I was on YouTube just a few years ago, the reason I even shared the levels was because I was sick of the left misunderstanding the right. And I was like, okay, guys, I'm on your side, but you're pissing me off a little bit. And I want to explain to you how like bubbles work. But then it didn't really work and it still doesn't work. It only works for the people who are interested in kind of hopping those things and changing. Because if you're a religious person who goes atheist, you know you've hopped bubbles. But then if you take that out and out and out more and more and more and more, and you realize like, oh my God, I don't even know what's going on. But like okay, I'll stick to what I know, right? I even had this when I share the levels with my family, oh my God, it's like a shit show in the living room. Everyone's like yelling and everyone's trying to figure out. The thing is though, is like these are good people. They're just like they have to be this way. And I have to be this way. And like that's what's gonna cause tension. And that's why we have to like love each other. But that's a really hard thing to ask of the world when my parents are like voting to deny me civil rights
Hmm.
actively and reminding me every day that they're gonna do it. And it's like, yeah, we're just gonna play this game. We're gonna see how it goes. But like, what am I gonna do? Jail my parents? Kill my parents? No. And I would fight the world for my parents. P.S. I love my parents more than I love the whole world,
Hmm.
even if they vote against my civil rights.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just like what it is, right? And I think that's what the nuance is. I know you said that I'm not a very nuanced person, and I appreciate that. I think it's my black and white way of speaking, right? I
Yeah.
understand
That
that.
is
I'm a very black
it
and
is
white.
that is literally what I think that's what I said is that like you say
Yeah.
things in binaries and then
Yes.
afterwards you're like it's just more nuance, and I'm like you're not saying the nuance, you're saying the black and white stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as my partner pointed it out too. He's like, "You're really bad at explaining how you got from point A to point B." I was like, "No, I said it." And he's like, "No, your neurodivergency is showing. You did not say it." I was like, "I did say it." And so this is something I promise to work on in 2023. I will work on actually explaining it. Even my audience are like, "Quote, Brittany, just do better, guys. I'm not going to tell you how, but just do better."
Base.
So I will
That's
work on that, I promise. It is a communication error in my style of speaking, but I will get better at it. But yeah, like I understand that there's all this gray area in the world. I think for my own life, I'm really comfortable not having a lot of it in my direct life. But I know for other people they have to. That's why I don't want to prescribe anyone anything. I don't want to eradicate anybody. I want everyone to live their life. I just want people to stop hurting each other. But I know that harm isn't, you can't eradicate harm without eradicating people. So I would argue that you have to harm reduce. You're a Christian, I'm atheist. Learn to let live. Like I'm in a European country that's like anti-gay marriage, but allows topless beaches. That's their religion. And I'm like, okay, like that's the way to do it, I guess. But like, you know what I mean? Everyone is so different and diverse.
I mean
And I know that.
this could be a conversation for another time, but that is like that when it comes to prescriptions, when we're talking
Mm.
about prescriptions, and then you say, "Oh, I'm not telling anybody to do anything," like
Hmm.
I, that is, I think that's probably one of the most important parts of like having understanding is sharing understanding with other people and trying to get
Mm.
them to understand and being able to explain it in a way where they can grasp onto it and actually get it. And I appreciate all of the people who were influences on me and who pushed me and kept telling me I was a freaking idiot for so long, so that
Mm.
I could get to the place that I'm at now, and that
Hmm.
these were people who had very strong convictions in what it was that they believed. And we only make the world better by continuing to have prescriptions, continuing to push people, tell people what's right, explain it to them, get them to understand. And that's how like we make change over time. That's how we get rid of, you know, slavery and, you know, all sorts of horrible things in the world. Is like we figure out, the people who figure out that it's bad first start explaining it to everybody else, and hopefully it spreads and takes hold in a large way to where it actually has dramatic and systemic changes on everybody else. But when you say like, oh no, getting to this point just means that you don't tell anybody how to do anything. Like, you can't force people to do anything,
right,
but you should have prescriptions for them. You should be able to tell them, like, I believe this is the best way to do things because I believe that's true. And if I believe that's true, I will want you to act in accordance with that as well, right?
But I don't believe like I have access to objective truth. I only have subjective truth through the consciousness that is Brittany.
It doesn't have to be objective, but it can be based on like utility, right?
Sort of, right? So the problem is like somebody like Brittany doesn't fit anywhere in the world. The world does not work for somebody like me, right? No country, no city, no state works perfectly for me. So my work is predicated on the individual. I don't work with community efforts anymore. I used to be like a protester. I used to do advocacy work. I don't do that anymore because it wasn't working for me. It wasn't fulfilling. And so my work is predicated on helping the individual who's not trying to change the world, who's trying to change themselves. And then by proxy, of course, like I believe individuals make up a community and the community will shift based off of that. But like if I can't get my own friends and family to change, who am I to say that I could, right? Do I encourage it? Not really. It depends. But like who am I to take away their joy? Who am I to tell my brother stop being Catholic? Because in order to be pro-gay, he would have to stop being Catholic. There is no lukewarm Catholic world where he gets to be pro-gay and Catholic. That doesn't exist. I come from a very black and white Catholic background. You're either actually believe in God and transform your life around him, or you kind of pick and choose and do a cafeteria thing, right? So again, that's the problem. I am very judgy, Tom. If people wanted to be like me, no one's going to reach my standard. I told the internet to stop cheating and people fucking got angry at me. They were like, that's bullshit. You can't tell people not to cheat. Cheating is a part of life. And I'm like, okay, see, I don't know what to do here. Should I tell you to stop cheating or not? Like, and then I say, fine, cheat if you want. Just stop dating the people who don't want to cheat. You know what I mean? Just cheaters date cheaters, right? But that's no fun for the cheaters, is it?
I did find that to be a contradiction, that you were very upset about cheating, but then you also were like, oh, I don't care what anybody else does. Like, no problem to me.
I don't care enough to like condemn, like, you know, in the sense, but I care enough. Like, I've got brothers that would not make good husbands right now. And I call their girlfriends up. I'm like, don't date my brother. You know he's not ready to be a husband. What are you doing? And they'll be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And like, I even had a brother who cheated on his wife. And what do? We called her up. We're like, girl, what are you doing? Divorce his ass. What are you doing? Like, and that's the thing. At the end of the day, I will put my foot down about my own ethics and morals, but they're mine. And I don't think that it necessarily makes sense for me to like ostracize or hate people. Like, some of my best friends are cheaters. Okay.
Sure, but when you say they're yours, again, like, you think that those are the best. Like, you believe that those are right for people like
me. For me, for people like me.
So you don't think the world would be a better place if everybody acted in accordance with your morals and ethics?
Not necessarily, because everyone's so different. So my family would want to die if they had to be like me, right? I don't think the world would be better if they had to be outside of their joy. Because then they would be suffering. And why? Because I wanted them to live like me? It makes no sense. Like, I'm very sex positive. I'm pro OnlyFans, right? If I told you, Tom, you should be pro OnlyFans and you should get a girl on OnlyFans, like, what is that? That doesn't make sense to me, right? Like, why? Just because I like it?
Well, but no, but that's different. I'm okay with girls having OnlyFans. I enjoy OnlyFans girls. Yes, I have no problem with girls. I like as many hot girls getting in OnlyFans as possible. I'm all for it. But
yeah, for sure.
But yes, like, I'm saying that I have my own insecurities that I know that would create a problem within our relationship to where I wouldn't want to do that. But that doesn't mean that I have a problem with people doing OnlyFans.
Okay, so just to clarify, because I think this is interesting, like if I was to prescribe, like if a girl came to me and said, I'm really pro sex work and I'm pro sex positivity, but I want to date Tom, he seems really nice. I'd be like, he's working on his insecurities about it, don't date him. Or would I say, date Tom if you'd like, he's going to have a problem with this, so you're going to have to get to the point where you have to accept him either who he is, he might never change, or he might eventually be someone different, but don't live for his potential. Don't live for the version of Tom that gets over that insecurity and is like, pro OnlyFans. Like, what do I tell that girl in that moment?
I don't know that Tom's working on those insecurities. I think Tom is okay with that insecurity, and that's just something that I'm looking for. But that doesn't mean that I don't want women to do OnlyFans. It just means that I wouldn't date a girl who does OnlyFans. So it's not a moral or ethical question for me. It's just a an option.
So I think when people prescribe their own personal things, they are projecting onto other people their desires. And I don't want to do that. I want a partner who's pro OnlyFans and doesn't stop me from posting on OnlyFans. So I found that partner. I didn't settle for somebody who was okay with everything but needed me to get off sex work, right? And so again, you can't, I don't want to prescribe as if my way is the way for everybody. That doesn't make sense. I think we're all animals on a planet evolved over time. I don't think we know what we're doing outside of our own like ego. And I think we're doing the best we can, holding on by like a thread. The world works in a perfect, like on the edge of destruction every day, right? So because I think we're animals evolved over time, who's to say my way of being an animal is better than someone else's, except for me, which only exists in this category of human. So if I say like religion is shit and it should be absolutely eradicated, do I really think that? Yes, as a Brittany, but not as a citizen of the world. As a citizen of the world, I am different. That's why I say my partner and I have values that we hold, and then we have values that we have with the world because we're community members. So even though
Sure.
we're anti-religion, we do not want the world to be non-religious. It doesn't make sense to us.
But you're saying that like when people are making prescriptions that they're trying to push their lifestyle onto others. But obviously when you're talking to me, the person who's saying you should make prescriptions, I'm not pushing my lifestyle onto others. I am saying go do OnlyFans. That's perfectly fine and moral. Do it all day. I just have trouble dating that person, just as I would have
Sure.
trouble dating a person who, like maybe lives in Iraq. Like it's just like a
Sure.
preference issue for me, where it's
So
not a moral issue.
yeah, I think maybe it's similar where like be a cheater if you want to be a cheater, but I think you're a piece of shit. And I
Well, no,
think
I think
people who,
cheating is bad.
right?
Cheating is
But like
something
that's
that
the
is
thing
bad.
though. Plenty of people consent to a cheating relationship. We see it on the internet right now. There are couples who've absolutely been cheating and they just continue the relationship. So it's obviously not that bad.
Well, so okay, so that is somebody who's settling. That is somebody who's like compromising a little bit too
Mm,
much. So when you build a like cheating is where you break the rules that you've put on your relationship, right?
right. Right.
Some relationships don't have those rules, and so it's just not cheating. But the ones who
Right.
do have those rules, if you go outside the bounds of that and you've already decided that you do want those bounds, either you've realized that you don't care so much about those boundaries anymore and you're
Hmm.
reprioritizing things, or
Hmm.
you are settling for something that where like I don't even want to say settling, because yeah, I do think that like at this point you probably have just reprioritized. You've decided that there are other things that are important enough in this relationship to keep you there, whereas even though this is something you thought was like you know uh crap, I'm blanking on the
Like a
word.
deal breaker.
Yes, a deal breaker. That's exactly what I was trying to think of.
Hmm.
Yes, even
Hmm.
though you thought it was a deal breaker, you realized that it wasn't, and then now you can kind of like reprioritize things in your head.
For sure. For sure. For sure. Yeah, I think that's where like all the nuances for me is like I really don't want people to live like I do because I know I'm very specific. People tell it to me all the time, apparently. I never thought of myself as very abnormal. But the more feedback I get from the world, the more I'm like, okay, then I'm the weirdo. But I know I have an audience of weirdos and I would like them to be happy. And they need very specific ways of existing because they've already been rejected by all of the world. Usually, they're already ostracized from their communities. They're already struggling as it is to date or to find friends that like see them. So my prescriptions to those people is to get them to a goal. Like when a caller calls me and they're like religious, I always say, "What's your religion?" And then I research their religion. I go, "Okay, so according to your religion, you can't do this, this, or this. How do we get you to your goal within the bounds of your bubble?" Right? So
Hmm.
like even in my calls, I'm not trying to make people like me. I want them
Sure,
to be happy with who they are. So I can't prescribe to the world. Because again, Tom, if I prescribe to the world how it should be, the world wouldn't exist.
but you do make some prescriptions, right? You do think that it's wrong to murder people. You think it's wrong to steal from people. You would probably prescribe those things to people. But
Mm,
what I wonder is where you would draw that line, where you like
well,
do
but
prescribe
you
and
know the
don't
new,
prescribe.
but think about the nuance of murder itself, right? I have four military brothers. Sometimes you have to do things you wouldn't do in civilian life, right? Sometimes you would have a relationship with death that you wouldn't have in civilian life. So in that moment, the context allows you to murder.
What you
You're
mean
allowed to take
kill?
the life.
Like
Well,
murder is
that's the problem.
unjust killing, whereas
Mm,
like
I kind of think war is unjust.
okay,
So if I prescribed onto the world what is Brittany's version of murder, it would be war. So that's
okay.
why I'm saying I can't prescribe that to the world. It's unfair. Because I wouldn't want to think of all my military people as murderers, but like a part of me is like, you had to do something that I think is disgusting. And we got to the point where our civilized countries had to go to war to kill women, children, and men, boys who are convinced to join the military, right? And I'm like pro-military because like I got military background, but like at the same time, I think it's super like we're not doing our best when we go to war.
I tell you right now, I'm getting ready to go murder my family. I hate my kids and my wife and everybody. You're just going to be like, human's going to human or what?
Well, obviously, again, in an instance in which I belong to a society, right? Like I choose the countries I live in. I try to live in a place that's closest to my values. And I live in countries where like that's not allowed. And I agree with that prescription. But I also would understand if somebody was born into a different country where that's allowed, why people wouldn't understand why that's wrong. So again, I have to meet them where they're at, understand their thinking, and then decide, what do I think about these people genuinely? And honestly, I want to be as far away from them as possible. I want to be in a civilized world where we're not murdering people. And I do think it's wrong. Brittany thinks it's wrong. But again, I think it's wrong because I have the understanding that it's wrong.
Well, when you say you have the understanding, that makes it sound objective, but what your explanation just now made it sound like it's not objective. So it's not really an understanding. It's just a belief then, right?
Yes. So I have the belief that from my understanding of what I think is good and evil, what I think is bad or good, what I think is like on a spectrum of the human like experience, that people are put into situations and where the context can shift for them. I can think of like 1,000 examples, but like I guess the murder one's good enough. Like for some people, capital punishment is murder, and for other people, it's not. For me, self-defense is important. I want to know I can self-defend myself. I want to know I can like hurt someone if I have to, if they're coming at me. But also some people take that ahead and they preemptively defend themselves, i.e. committing the crime, right? And calling it defense. So I think for me, I just want people to do least amount of harm, the least amount of harm. So focus on consent. Can someone consent to being murdered? Or does someone consent to having their life limited, right? I live in Europe now, and people over here like can do some of that. Sometimes they can choose to die via doctors. Like that's different, right? But it's still death. So again, like have you heard the recent studies about how plants have consciousness? I've been reading a book about it. I'm so excited because like yeah, they even have done they did a recent study where like plants even like see themselves in mirrors possibly or see us. And like all the vegans are like, what am I going to eat now? And I'm like, yes, because I actually do believe like everything has a consciousness. Like I think everything is kind of alive. Like look at the earth, look at trees, look at plant, like everything is alive, right? We're just having a relationship with what does it mean to be alive. And I would hope that we live in a world where people don't rape and murder and kill and cheat and all these things, but we do. And so we have to accept that we do in order to ask ourselves, do we have the right to ask them not to exist in this way? And so, like, Brittany, again, live in a place where people aren't allowed to murder.
Yeah, so earlier you started off talking about like the way that you think of things personally versus the way that you would think of things for a society. When I'm talking about morals and ethics, I'm talking about like what is best for society, what helps us all get along with one another, what are rules that we can build for us to interact with one another. And then I have my own personal preferences, like not dating a girl who has an OnlyFans. But when it comes to like morals and ethics, I'm not going to prescribe that people don't do OnlyFans because that's not actually going to harm the way that we interact with each other within society. But if you can't go outside without being stolen from, and that you have like you're terrified every time you walk out the door, that would be harmful to society. So you can't steal. Like those are, if we had a breakdown of communication where nobody could trust one another, that would be harmful to society. So now people shouldn't lie. Like there's a bunch of things that we can kind of list that say this would be harmful to society. We would not be able to interact in the way that we do now. We wouldn't be able to have so many cogs within the system where it works like it does currently. And so we have to build rules in order for us to be able to engage with one another. And those are going to become prescriptions so that people can exist within society. So like, I think you said you had BPD, right? Like the only reason BPD is a thing is because of society, because of the way that it exists, because of like the way that our society is constructed. It could be constructed in a way to where BPD was like a superpower instead, and it was not thought of as like a mental illness or something like that, right? These are all just us making rules so that we can exist within the society, and we want everybody to be able to exist within society because that's the only way that they're going to be like that's the way it's going to be most beneficial to the most amount of people.
Yeah, so I don't care about the most amount of people. I'm a minority amongst minorities, right? Like the most amount of people don't serve minorities. They don't serve people like me. So the world has always adapted to the majority. And let's say it's traditionally been religious and definitely straight and definitely white. So definitely like things that aren't helpful to people like me, right? I can't risk my life by adhering to what works for the majority when my life is a minority life. So I don't think I have that option, but I could say that generally speaking, even though I don't
But
like
is
to
it
do
again
that.
just coming to those rules? Like it's not everything. We're not prescribing a
Well,
lifestyle. We're not
so here's a
prescribing
problem.
like preferences.
If I say I want freedom of religion because I want people to be free,
Mhm.
I'm directly harming my civil rights because we allow religious people to preach in church how they want their constituents to vote. As a Catholic, I always heard it in church, even though they shouldn't be doing that, they did. The way they vote against my civil rights is an option for them. I'm from America. I get it. But like freedom is the consequence of chaos. And the chaos I love, I will choose freedom over anything. But there's no order in chaos, right? When I choose freedom, I'm choosing the reality that I cannot prescribe to the majority.
But it's harmful
Because
to
then
an individual, and that's a little bit different than it being harmful to society. So,
religion is
like,
harmful to society.
well, I'm saying that not having the freedom to religion would be more
Uh,
harmful to society, right?
I
That
don't know if
like
I would agree with that in about 100 years, right? If
that would
more
be a
queer
bit
people,
authoritarian, and like
I,
that would be like a bit of
I
a
think
slippery slope to where you can control people's
that's how
lives a
I feel
little bit
about
too much.
prescriptions. That's how I feel about prescriptions.
But that's what I'm saying is that there are some prescriptions where we can control people's lives in a way that is only going to be beneficial to society and is only taking away the harm. Whereas taking
I
away
think,
something like religion or freedom of
mhm.
speech, that would be harmful to society and harmful to the individuals to where it would cause a lot more problems.
I don't think we could agree on what would help because I think people are so diverse and unique that like what would be good for Texas wouldn't be good for like like California. And I would actually prefer the more diverse outlook, which is like, can we have so many bubbles, so many countries, so many lifestyles, so many cultures in which society isn't just a continent. It's like areas of that society, right? Because again, I'm not a big fan of Islam. I'm not a big fan of Catholicism. I'm not a big fan of religion. But I have a lot of friends who do it. I think they're good people, and I wouldn't want to take that away from them. But their existence is in contrast to my existence. My existence is in contrast to their existence. So to prescribe something on Brittany's standard would be to say that you basically can't exist just in the same way that they're saying it to me. Because we don't agree on what is murder. We don't agree on what is harm. We don't agree on what is good. We do not agree on what's good for society. Hence the chaos.
Sure. But that's why like the prescriptions exist. Like that's the only reason that morals exist or laws exist. That's the reason you think cheating is wrong is because people before you like created these boundaries for relationships and it became normalized to where like we started to adhere to these rules as a norm, and now we all live in a society that has good rules and has good ethics to where we can have small differences here and there, but overall we have a really great place that we all live in because people made really good prescriptions that made really good changes to society. And so currently there are people who are progressives that highly disagree with people who are liberals, who disagree with people who
Mm-hmm.
are conservatives, and we all have a lot of disagreements on what is best, but and we have differences in morals, but we're all fighting for those morals to become the norms because we want that society to be what our next generations and their generations after grow up in. Just as
Right.
the black people who grew up in slavery wanted their kids to not grow up in slavery and to be able to go to school
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to vote and those sorts of things. So you're not fighting for it to where like tomorrow it's all going to change. You're fighting for it to where generations from now they'll live in a better world.
Yeah, I don't think I'm invested in that fight anymore.
Okay. I don't think it's all. I'm not so much talking about being invested in it. You talk about level 5 is when you get to the point where you don't make prescriptions. That like this is all of a
No,
sudden
no,
like you're so wise that you're kind of detached from the like small squabbles of everyday people.
no. Okay, kind of, but not really, right? A 5 just means that I have radically accepted that I do not know, and all I know is what I'm able to perceive. I have a relationship with myself in relation to what I know and what I believe, like a true relationship. So, right now, in order to have that relationship, in order to care about the things that other people are fighting about, these constructs we make up, right? We have to go back into the bubble and decide, like, am I actually angry about this, or do I just want people to get along? To say I just want people to get along pisses people off. I just want people to get along, but it's not good enough. So then they want me to act in like their prescription of action, which coincides and ruins my, or doesn't coincide and ruins my sense of joy, right? So I'm saying as a consciousness, I'm a 5, which has nothing to do with wisdom. I think I'm a very unwise person and I will die probably unwise, right? I say that all the time. My audience and I fight about it all the time. I don't think wise people exist on Horde. I think we earn wisdom as we age, right? Being introspective is a relationship you're having with your consciousness.
Mhm.
And by proxy, extrospection, the things outside of yourself. So I know that I grew up, like you said, with borderline, probably because of a society that pre-abandoned me because I was a queer kid in a religious community, right? And I formed this sense of self that is delusional sometimes, and I have to put myself on, like, back in place. I get ostracized on the internet when I act out of turn for my borderline, even though it's not related, from an illness I was given as a child from society. And I'm the only one who gets to be responsible for it. So you want me to look at that same society and try to explain to them why they should humanize me at every turn? That is my prescription. Start humanizing everybody. But you can't do that in a world that is diverse and that has choice. In a free world, what I think is right isn't what you think is right. My friends who are also 5s, we disagree all the time on what society should do. We can't agree because we're different people with different needs. So again, I can only advocate for the individual. I can only advocate for what I think is good for people that are like me. I don't know how to tell the world, be different than who you are any more than, like, and not be the people that abused me when I was younger. Right?
Sure. I mean, for
Like,
me,
how do you
I agree with all the things that you're saying, and I don't want everybody to be like me, and I want people to be respectful of people who are different from them, and all of that. But I also want them to, like, adhere to some sort of rules that are going to make it to where people can be individuals, people can be different from one another. And I think that even, like, most of what I'm talking about are all coming from Enlightenment values. They're coming from liberal values, and that these prioritize freedom, which is why if we're talking about, like, you know, religion versus, like, you know, gay people not feeling like they're a problem, we're prioritizing the freedom because we don't want some sort of, like, rule, or sorry, some sort of authoritarian law that's going to start to clamp down on people's freedoms as individuals. And so because we do value the individuals, we're still allowing people to be religious, we're still allowing people to be gay, but we're also building some constructs around those things to protect those people and to make sure that they can continue to be different.
But they're being threatened right now, right? Our Supreme Court is in battle right now over women's bodily autonomy. So,
And
like,
we're
it
fighting
goes
with
back
those
and
people,
forth.
right?
Right. And I want to get to the point where either we stop fighting, but we can't. Like, okay, would you argue that you were trying to change me as an individual, or can I be the person that I want to be right now?
Both. You can be the person that you are, while also I want to change the way that you think about things, and I want you to actually like,
And
think
if I
about
tell
things.
you,
Go ahead.
like, that's my problem. I already figured it out and I'm good to go. But to Tom, I could be better. But to me, I am my best version right now. And I'll be best as I go on, right? I'll always have to be best. I'll always have to be better. But the thing is like, I found my joy. So I don't want anyone to tell me to change. But I also don't want to tell other people who found their joy to change. But I want to give people a way out. So if you're a queer kid in a religious home, I want you to be able to get out without being killed. If you're a woman in a home and you're in a relationship, in a marriage where, like, your husband's abusing you, I want you to get out. If you're a man in an abusive relationship, I want you out. So the only prescription I would make for society, here's where I'll compromise with you, is that I would like a society that gives people a way out.
Okay. Yeah, I think that we have, like, a fundamental difference in philosophy, that, like, the thing that I preach more on my channel, or the thing that I try to, like, imbue into people more than anything else, is to always have something that you're working on, always be improving. You're never going to be perfect, but that should be the goal. Perfection should be the goal, and you always want to strive for that and always keep working towards that, and always try to get better and better.
Like, just to get better.
Perfection is not
For
a
sure.
real thing, but that is
Yeah, I
still the
agree.
goal anyways. Like, you will never get to perfection, but that should always be the goal anyways.
I think I'm a little bit more lax. I am. People really don't like that about me, but I just feel like like, again, you've seen my issues with people on the internet. What am I supposed to do about that? Go to their DMs and be like, you better talk to me, bitch, and better get better. No, fuck it. Let them be miserable and do their fucking little psychotic loop of neuroticism. Like, who fucking cares, Tom? Let them be themselves. If this is how they're happy or claim to be happy, fuck it.
Yeah,
Why
I'm
should
not
I
forcing
waste my,
anybody to change, but I'm
But
advocating
but
for those things nonetheless.
even the desire to want people to change, I think comes from a place of getting trapped in that particular bubble of wanting to change people. I would argue like wanting to change people is the problem with society. We want to change people instead of live and let live, leave people alone. But we can't. We need them to know they could be just like me. You know what I mean? And then we end up suffocating each other.
I think that you keep going back to like things that I'm not really talking about, where you're talking about
Okay.
like personality traits and stuff like that, whereas I'm talking about the way that you interact with other people and the rules that we're going to build around that.
Oh, but like, what does that mean, right? Like, okay, I have a friend who hates people who pull pranks. He just thinks they're the bane of society and should be jailed. And I'm like, who cares? A bunch of kids acting like doing pranks. I don't give a fuck, right? I want to live in a society where people can do pranks. He doesn't. What do we
But
do?
if it's harmful to people, like
What is harmful? It's subjective.
it is subjective to a point, but we all live within a world where we've already kind of constructed what we believe to be harmful, and obviously,
But who constructed that?
I
I don't agree to the construct. I don't agree. Then now what? That's what I'm saying. We can't agree, and that's the chaos.
Okay.
Because when I say live and let live, it's not good enough, right? When I say I want people to have a way out, so fine.
I also want people to live and let live. That's why I keep like I also want people to live and let live. But I'm going to advocate for my my perfect society. I'm also going to advocate for that, and I want people to believe that. Like Martin Luther King wasn't running around like grabbing people and putting them on marionette strings.
No,
to
he was
force
busy
them...
cheating on his wife.
Yeah, he wasn't forcing people to do anything, but he was advocating for what he wanted, and he was trying to be loud about it, and he was trying to make sure that as many people as possible could hear him.
I feel like I do that in the sense that like, hey, if you want this life, this is what you should do. But otherwise, like, I can't care what everyone else is doing because like they're not going to do what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
if you're not, they have to share your values first in order for anything you're saying to be important whatsoever, right? If somebody doesn't share my values whatsoever, me advocating for you to not harm somebody else, why would they care about that if they don't actually value not harming somebody else?
Exactly.
So like, they obviously have to have the values first, and then after that comes me convincing them that this is part of their values already. And I think people growing up in a liberal society are going to share most of my values already, and that they're just like on a journey to figure out how to actually exist within those rules in the best way possible.
Yeah, my goal, and this won't happen by the way, is that the liberals will outbreed the religious. But that won't happen because like I'm even considering not having kids, so we're fucked. Like if we're not having kids en masse and the conservatives are, the world will be more conservative, and I will have to accept that world. But like I'm going to be outnumbered, right? Unless we actually procreate kids to be little armies, and I'm not going to do that to a kid. I'm not going to force them into existence to have to experience life just with the hope that they'll vote liberal. You know? So my hope for the world is that we harm reduce. My hope for the world is that we're kinder and better, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Sure, I understand, like, it's not everybody's journey to be, like, an activist or something like that, right? Like, I care about politics, but I'm not out there marching and, you know, and knocking on doors or anything like that. But when I'm talking to people about things that I care about, I'm talking to them about, you know, morals, ethics, things that I think would make the world a better place. I think that crap, there was something you said a second ago that I was trying to, I forget what it was, but but yeah, overall, like, I'm just trying to, like, do my part. Oh, yeah, okay. So when we interact with people as humans, we're freaking weird, dude, okay? Like, we care what other people think about us. We care, like, how society treats us. We care, we're very social animals, and so we've started to use tools within that dynamic where we know we can help people become better cogs within the machine. And so we have stigmas, we have labels, we can call people homophobic, and then nobody wants to be called homophobic. Like, we can call them racist and nobody wants to be called a racist. And so now we use these labels to stigmatize certain behaviors to where people are less and less likely to do them. And that seems to be like a good process to actually helping people change, even if they're not interested in changing, even if they're not interested in the same values. You kind of help them change and do things less, even if they're not interested in doing things less. And lots of people will look at that as like a controlling behavior, but society has to be controlling to some level. Society, like, it can't exist without actually pushing people to be a certain type of person and exist within the world in a certain type of way. Because otherwise literally society would fall apart. We would all lose all these cool clothes and cool microphones and internet and cars and all of these awesome things that we have. Like, we have to actually have stigmatization to some level so that we can exist in the way that we do today.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I do think that that's why my work is predicated on the individual, like the true individual, right? Like, not the society individual. Those are different things. Because again, we live in a society, though we can pick and choose where we go if you're lucky enough, right? But there's not enough people who agree without just like, I think diluting everything down to like 5 categories. Okay. I don't think there's enough allowance for nuance of the individual in society. So my work is predicated in helping people be happy and joyful, even though society sucks, because I can't change racism overnight. I can't change homophobia overnight, right? But if you're going to go and prescribe to society what I think they should do, and I just say harm reduce, it's too subjective. If I say don't murder, pro-lifers are going to come out of the woodwork, which, by the way, I'm a pro-life, pro-choicer. I do think you're killing a baby. I just don't give a fuck. Because I think you have the right to bodily autonomy. Right?
I am pro-life. I am pro-life, so yeah.
Fair. Like, I told my partner before we got married, I was like, hey, red flag, or not red flag, but like hard limit. If we get pregnant, we're like, I don't know if I can have an abortion. And we talked about that. And I got birth control right away because even though abortion's on the table, it's very hard for me to process having an abortion at this stage in my life. Right? But then I had to know myself to know that limitation. I had to know myself to know, like, could I handle that reality? And like, could I have an abortion? Like, I'm open to it, but it's really hard for me to process because I do think you're killing the potentiality of that consciousness that I think does exist the moment it like forms into enough of a thing. Like, we're doing it. That's a thing, right? And so that's hard. So again, I'm just trying to make balance to the best of our ability. I think people are too sure of themselves in terms of their prescriptions, and I'm very sure of myself when it comes to the individual. But for society, that feels like a big ask for me to know what to prescribe to society. You know what I mean? Because again, I think my standard would be too high for people. Or too hard. I think, what's the word people use when they say it's too unrealistic? Even asking for a Build-A-Bear relationship is too unrealistic. Why? Like, why? If I can't have the exact romantic relationship I want, how am I ever going to act like I can have a society I want?
Sure.
Yeah, it seems like too big.
But that's, I mean, that's still what you strive for, right? Like, you still want that. You still try to get that. And that's still your hope in the end, is that you get your Build-A-Bear relationship and that you get like a Build-A-Bear society. Like, those are the things that we should strive for and advocate for.
Again, when you say strive for, you're putting an obligatory idea. I think if people...
I don't think I'm saying it's an obligatory ideal. I think I'm saying that this is just what you want. And because that's what you want, you try to... Everybody wants things to be the way that they want them. And so they push for that.
Yeah, I don't know if people do, though. Like, okay, you know how I get into fights with people over, like, walking the walk? People will say this is the right thing for society, but they don't live it themselves. Useless, right? Like, if society isn't going to mimic those values already, society doesn't want them. If you have to force or brainwash people to coincide with your values, they didn't want them. And I want a world that's free so people can choose, and then we can have a society that has sort of boundaries. Like, I know some European countries right now are having the problem with like religious communities, and they're secular communities. And I think those secular communities should absolutely have rules against the religious, which is discriminatory. But I don't think secular nations should become religious. But I think that that's the problem we're going to have, right? Because religious freedom is a thing, like in America, not other places. And the war we're going to have right now is who gets to exist.
I mean, that's
And the
already
truth,
happening. And
it is.
like religious people are becoming more and more stigmatized, and their beliefs are
Sure.
becoming more and more stigmatized.
Is that
There are
good or
less and
bad?
less
Like,
there's less and less religious people every day, and it seems to be that like a lot of the fundamentalist Christians have beliefs that are harmful for enough people to where it's something that has become stigmatized and something that's starting to disappear because people are thinking about it differently.
yeah, I just think it goes in cycles. So like in 100 or 200, you know how Gen Zers are less, or sorry, more homophobic? Like they're less into pro LGBT stuff, studies are showing. I think a lot of that is because they're not being raised with an understanding by millennials of like what it means to be pro LGBT. They just hear the news or on TikTok.
Hmm.
And so they don't have even an understanding of how we got here. I'll talk
Yep.
to people who are like, Brittany, gay people were never discriminated against in the United States. I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
that's an interesting perspective. And they'll show me Hollywood movies of gay people, and they'll show me like scenes and politics and out stars, and they'll show me a perspective of the United States that I didn't grow up with. So we're
Hmm.
all having different like relationships with these things, right? So again, I think my issue is that it goes in cycles and we're just like in this blip of history. So I look at us like we're living history. So like in 200 years, people are going to look at us and be like, man, Tom and Brittany were dumb. I'll be like, okay,
Sure.
touche, touche. And I'm going to be like, yeah, I was the dumb part of history probably, but I'm doing my best. And I think that's all I ask for. The best doesn't mean literally what you dream of as being the best, that perfect. Though I think I would want to strive for it. I'm not sure other people could handle it, right? Because then I have to ask them why, and they would have to answer. They would actually have to probably deconstruct their whole existence like you had to do, right? You would have to like literally become a new version of yourself, which is very painful. And I don't know that I'm ready to ask the world to do that when it could actually, in my opinion, cause a lot more harm if they're not ready, if they were never meant to be that person. So I just look at us as living history, and this is just like the time in history I'm alive, and I'm doing my
Well,
best.
when you say meant to be, you are kind of putting an obligatory perspective on it, where like I I was never meant to be the person that I am. People around me thankfully shaped me to be the person that I am, and I'm happy with this person. And I was open enough and introspective enough to like make the changes that were necessary time after time. But there were periods of my life where I did not like who I was. I didn't like what I was doing. I didn't like putting needles in my veins and shooting up every day and, making that the main priority on a daily basis. Like that, I didn't like that person and I didn't like who I was, but I do like who I am now. And I think that like I can test who I am now against other people and see how I exist in the world, how I'm helpful to other people, how I'm willing to help others, and that like yeah, I can actually test whether or not the person that I am now is a good person and somebody who's beneficial to society. And I hope that 100 years from now they look at us and they're like, oh, those people were freaking horrible pieces of crap, like we look at slave owners today, like because that means that we're continuing to progress and we're getting somewhere better, and that there are
Yeah.
people nonstop who are pushing for that and trying to help us get there.
Yeah, I think I believe in the spirit of what you're saying. I don't really believe people when they tell me they want a better world for future generations, because usually they want to go down a path that excludes people from their joy that don't deserve to be excluded. So I don't really believe people, even minorities, when they say like they want a better world. I'm like, who are you excluding? Who's the group you hate today? You know what I mean? Who are the people that aren't allowed to come with us into this paradise of like progression? And so the
It's
problem,
slave
Mhm.
owners, it's Nazis, it's like it's
Yeah,
people
I
that we
think I
already
think we
think shouldn't come with us.
I think we think that, but then people like my parents, I'm told every day by people to ditch them and like they should die in a ditch because they're anti-gay marriage. And my parents aren't slave owners and they're not Nazis. So again, I don't believe people. I don't think people hold enough nuance to actually see the complexities of a person. I don't think they understand how people get there. I don't think they even want to understand how Nazis got where they got. And listen, if I'm going shorthand, kill all the Nazis. Kind of boring though, huh? To
I
become
mean,
the thing you hated in the first place.
I love my parents. I want, as I said, like it's a priority for me that my girlfriends get along with my parents and that
Right.
like they're accepting of my family. But I
Right.
also hope that in 100 years, people like my parents don't exist. Like, but I still love them. I
Mm.
still want them to
Okay.
be here. And so the way that I interact with people on an individual level and the way that I think about them is going to be very different than the way that I think about things on a systemic level or a societal
Okay.
level.
Okay, I can vibe with that train of thought. And by the way, do you have somewhere to be? Are you good on spoons and stuff?
Yeah. Good. Wait, what are spoons? Oh no, I
Energy,
know.
like energy.
Okay, I know it's spoon. Is this a chronic pain thing? My sister.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was created by someone with lupus, and she tried to explain that everything she does takes energy, takes a spoon. And so she's like, I'm out today. That was it. I brushed my teeth. I'm gone. That's all I can
Yes,
do today.
she always talks
Yeah.
about how many spoons she has. So that okay.
Yes, yes. My brother calls them knives. He's like, I'm out of knives, guys. I'm out. I'm like, yeah, I love that. I love it. It's good language. But okay, wait. So okay, I think I can vibe with this because yes, in an ideal world, like the people I love the most, people who think like them wouldn't be the new generation of like thinkers of the world.
Mhm.
But again, I don't want to snap my finger and talk about, again, it feels a little eradicatey when I'm talking about how I don't want you to exist in 100 years. But what I'm trying to say is like, I hope society progresses enough where like this isn't the construct we're battling over because it really is a choice to hate people. It really is a choice to hate people over skin color. It really is a choice to have this relationship with other people in a way that's not efficient for joy, right? But again, my job, I think, as a society member is to facilitate people's relationship with themselves and to encourage them to be better versions of their individual consciousness, which I think then will reflect in society. So, like harm reduction. But I think I just fail when it comes to society. Like, I remember Destiny and Abba and I were having this conversation about sex work. And Abba was like, Brittany, we're talking about like society. And I was like, yeah, but fuck society. Like, they're dumb. Like, groups of people are dumb. Like the moment one or like five or more people in a room, it's just dumbville. So why are we even considering like groups of people, right? And that's the problem is like I don't know how to ask millions of people to work together. Except what we're doing now, which is pretty damn good, bro. Like I'm not mad about it. It's not perfect, but it's pretty okay for the flawed creature that we call human.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're already doing this. I mean, like the way that people on Twitter attack somebody if they say something homophobic, right? Like this makes it
Right.
to where somebody like you is going to be more comfortable existing on the internet, talking about your life, being honest about it, like being comfortable with yourself. Like the people who are like I'm friends with when I talk about Nazis, like I'm friends with neo-Nazis. I have them on my show.
Wow, that's
Like we
hard.
have
Yeah.
we have deep conversations. We have very shallow conversations. Like these are what the way that I interact with an individual is going to be very different than the way that I interact like
With the group.
with society. What I advocate
Yeah.
for is not necessarily what I'm telling this individual in this moment right now to do, but it is what I hope other people will push people to do. I was one of those neo-Nazis at one point, and I changed
Really?
because people, well, so I said I was very far right when I like
Wow.
I was like I was a white nationalist, but I was like teetering towards like what we call the alt-right back when like Richard Spencer was running everything. And so
Yeah.
the like people having ideas and talking to me, debating me, like when I first started my show, like I was very far right. The ideas that I had were very different, and I changed those ideas because those people were coming on and talking to me about how wrong they thought the ideas were. They weren't sitting there pointing their finger at me saying, you're a horrible person, you're a piece of crap, like we want to kill you. But they were saying the ideas that you believe in and the things that you advocate for are harmful. And those were things that like resonated with me and helped me change my entire like ideology and all of my ideals
Yeah.
over time.
I think that works for people that are open to change, which you are obviously a great candidate for, right?
Mhm.
But some people are going to die on hills, right? And that's just how it's going to be. And I kind of want to figure out how to make peace with those people because I think those are the problems. Like the problem isn't with people who are going to change. The problem is really with the people who aren't going to change.
But
And
that's the
then what do
point
we
in
do at that point?
stigmatization is that like they care about what other people think about them. They care about fitting into society. They care about having friends. They care about the labels that are put on them. And so they change to fit those labels because they're social animals.
Maybe we see it differently because, like, I'm gonna be real. The people that I see that I'm thinking about, they don't give a fuck how society sees them, bro. Like, they do not. That's why they're in those bubbles, right? Like they have enough of a society not to care. Like, you know what I mean?
They have a
So I
bubble
don't
that accepts them for who they are. Yes,
right.
but those bubbles change over time as well. The KKK doesn't exist anymore for a reason.
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
these
Sure.
like Nick Fuentes swears up and down that he's not a white nationalist and that he's not a racist and that he doesn't hate
Mm.
Jewish people. He says that for a reason, because saying
Yeah.
those things today is way more stigmatized, and he knows that he can't actually say those things out loud. Whereas the KKK did say those things out loud. They were loud and
Right.
proud with those sorts of ideals. And the less
Right.
people are open and loud with those ideals, the less they'll spread, the less they'll become like normalized, the less that they'll harm other people.
Mm.
And so we continue progressing, the less and less likely these things become.
Okay, what do you think about this? Because I remember when Nick Fuentes first came on the scene, I was like, guys, he's just a dumb kid, ignore him. And then the world did the thing that I always forget the world's gonna do, and they didn't ignore him. And they literally amplified him. And then he became like somebody the news even followed. I was like, oh my God. And then I sit there, I'm like, you know what? Society deserves itself. And then I go, you deserve it. If the world uplifts Kanye, uplifts Nick Fuentes, uplifts Trump, the world deserves it. And that's kind of my philosophy of like the world's like everything that's wrong with the world's a reflection of us, like as a
Sure,
collective, myself included, right?
Fox News covering him the way that they did
Ugh,
it wasn't so bad, because they did refer to him as a white nationalist and a
that's kind of
neo-Nazi.
good, I
But
guess.
then
Yeah.
you have people like me and Destiny and all of these other people who go and interact with their community. Their communities
Mm.
become part of our communities. They start to get along with people in our communities, and when they get along with people in our communities, they want to be seen in a good light by those people,
I
and they
mean, they are
start to
people.
change their Mhm. and
Like,
they
I
start
don't
to
know if they start
change
to
their
change.
values.
Man, I'm not a people pleaser. I'm gonna be real with you, bro. Like, I don't know. People do not change in my bubbles. Like, they
You
change.
want to have friends. You want people to like you. And so
I will not have friends at the expense of my joy. But all the people that are in my inner circle, like ride or die friends, like other people I love, you can come and go. Like,
sure,
God
but you
bless.
won't have your joy if you don't have any
Mm.
friends.
Those friends are nothing like me, though. We argue over everything. They literally have completely different values. Some of them are cheaters. Like, do you get what I'm saying? They're
I
so different from
Okay,
me.
it's
So I
different
do
from
not seek
like
out their approval.
it's different from what they accept of you versus what they expect of you, right? Like if they're not willing to be your friend because of this line that they're drawing, then you would have to change, because you want
Mm-mm.
friends. You are a
No,
social
no,
person. You
no.
want to be able to talk to
In my
people. You
bubble,
want to be
no. In my bubble, you could murder a whole bus full of kids and I will still visit you in prison, but like you're my friend.
sure.
But like it doesn't mean anything to say like
But
I'm
if
gonna
every
be
time they came around you, they kept telling you that like you're a whore, you're a slut, you're a piece of shit, like they can't stand you, like they talk about like the fact that you need to be a Christian, that you're sinning all the time. Like if this is all they talk to you about, you would probably have a problem being around this person. You wouldn't want to hang out with them anymore. They probably wouldn't like you very much. They
Mm.
wouldn't want to hang out with you
Here's
either.
the problem though. Again, if we're talking about superficial interactions, but it's when I have friends in their inner circle, that's the consciousness that is them. I can't replace them with somebody else. So there is no reality where we don't aren't friends. Like we've built enough of a relationship with that consciousness not to end it. Superficial friends, community, sure, but that's how I feel about everyone, Tom. Everyone annoys me. I love
Uh,
everybody in small spurts. I
Obviously.
do. So that's what
Yeah,
I'm saying. Like
obviously,
you're
but you
talking.
have a tolerance level. Like you have
We
a
all have a tolerance level.
yes, that's what I'm saying, is that you have a tolerance level and you have an area where you are unwilling of being tolerant. So most of the stuff that I look at it through the lens of language. Humans change their ideologies and the things that they believe based on the groups that they want to be a part of. They want to be accepted. That is like the
Mm,
most important thing to us, is we
yeah.
want to be accepted by somebody. And when you talk about bubbles, you're talking about the groups that accept us and the places where we feel at home. And
Sure.
as long as we have those bubbles, we're okay. The Nick Fuentes' community has a bubble for those people where they all feel accepted. But when they're in the real world, they're not able to talk about these things. They can only talk
Right, right,
about it when
right.
they're on the internet. And so they still have a bunch of outside pressures that are still changing them and making them think about things differently and making them wonder, because they want to have interpersonal relationships, not just people that they talk to on the internet. They want to have people
Yeah.
that they can actually connect with in person.
Yeah, I can see that. I think in my head, are you saying, just to clarify, that if you're trying to give them like a different home, like a different bubble to find at home, but they have to change to join? And so by giving them a place to be, as long as they change, you're like eradicating sort of bad thought from the world?
Yeah, so like in my community, we allow neo-Nazis into into the Discord, into the chat, like all these things, but we still have the same rules that apply to literally everybody. It doesn't change for
Mm-hmm.
them. And when they're in there
Mm-hmm.
and they start hanging out in VCs, they start hanging out in the chats, they start hanging out with these people, they like these people, they see that these people accept them, they start to like bend what it is that they're willing to do. So if normally anytime they see a trans person, they're going to say all sorts of horrible things. But in this community, we have tons of trans people, and they
Right.
know that they'll get kicked out pretty quickly if they start to be
Right. Right.
hateful
Right.
towards trans people. So they start to bend their language and change what it is that they're saying so that they can still exist within the community. Then they become friends with the trans people because the trans people are cool and chill and just like anybody else. And so they start to see things a little bit differently, and slowly they start to like change the way that they view the world.
Mm. I think you and I are both interested. Correct me if I'm wrong. I want people to really change if they're going to change, or to be really honest about where they are and how they think about the world. And then I want us to be able to consent to either interact or not interact with those people. And then I want to live in a world that gives people a way out. So if somebody is like, I don't know, like in an Andrew Tate type of relationship, which I think is like pretty toxic and I don't recommend it. But if you want to do that, for every guy that is Andrew Tate, there's a girl that is Andrew Tate. So fine, you do you. I wouldn't recommend it because I believe consent has to be the forefront of every relationship. And I don't think you consent when you feel secondary. Okay. I think you have to feel equal. But that's my opinion. That's subjective. So I would want people to be like changed in their consciousness, but not feel bullied into pretending to be one of the cool kids, like
I
one of the
think they're the
pro.
same thing. I think they're the
Oh, that's
same thing.
interesting.
Yeah, I think that
Mm,
like the habits that you develop are what changes you. So when I'm talking about changing my personality, changing who I am, one of the major things that I had to change that was the hardest for me, because I was a con man for a while, was lying. I got off on lying. I loved it. I got a high off of it. Like I would lie for the dumbest reasons, but I wasn't even a con man anymore. Now I was just digging myself into these freaking stories that I didn't want to tell anymore. So I started actually telling people when I lied. Like if I said something I knew it was going to be embarrassing, I knew it was going to suck, and that
mhm.
they were going to look at me like a freaking idiot. And that really helped me change my habits and change who I was. The habits that you have are who you are, and that it like the way that you exist with other people, that is you. That is the way that you like when we say you, we're only talking about the way that we categorize you, the way that we think of you, and the categorizations are just words we're using to communicate some sort of pattern in the first place. So the patterns are generally who you are, and that'll change your consciousness because that's like those are the patterns that you're developing.
I think we're having different relationships with our consciousness, maybe. When I think of the consciousness, I think about who you are outside of society. I don't think of who you are in reflection of society. I think you exist outside of society and then you integrate into society. I think you are a part of society. And then when you reach a different level of introspection, you start to see yourself as an individual consciousness in relation to society, but you are not society. You are society politically, you are
Hmm.
society as a collective, but your consciousness is not society.
Hmm.
So again, I don't want to have to bully or ostracize people for them to change. I want them to come to that conclusion on their own or to be happy on their little bubble of a planet that is far away from me. Because I don't want to become the thing that I hated in the first place.
Yeah, I don't think that we get to the point that we're at now where people like you can exist comfortably. Like we're not at a place where black people can exist comfortably. If we just say just do your thing, own your slaves, be a Nazi, like do all that, hate gay
Mm,
people, like, just do your thing, like because then yeah, more and more people are ostracized and are incapable of
well, they
existing in a
couldn't
normal
own
way.
slaves if people had a way out. So again, I'm happy to prescribe generally a prescription of people should always have a way out. So you can't have a slave because the slave would have to have a way out.
Sure. I what
So
what
I'm
I'm
happy to
saying
go
is
that
that
far.
but even those people are advocating for slavery to be legal and to be the social norm, and
That's fine
that's you're
to
saying that
advocate.
those are the things that you're willing to stigmatize. Is that what you mean?
I'm willing to say that I would be willing to say that a good society that gives people a way out, and anything other than that is a bad society. So I'm willing to put my foot down there. And so therefore, you can't have rape, you can't have false imprisonment, you can't even have like in my opinion, unjustified imprisonment, which is a majority of people in prison. I don't think you could have like slavery, right? Because the slaves would have to have a way out. Prisoners should have to have a way out. People should have to have a way out of their circumstance. And if we don't allow them that opportunity, that's a fault of society. Should they have a number of times they can do it? Sure, let's make it 50, right? But who gets to suffer while they're figuring their shit out, right? Us, society, because we cause suffering, right? If the person who chronically cheats and lies never gets better and it takes them 50 cheating on their partner 50 times, like what do you want me to do with that person? In my culture, we don't ostracize them from the family gatherings. We just point out like, hey, just FYI, don't date him, bro. He cheats. And then that person can feel butthurt about it. They can still come to dinner, but like, bro, you can't go around doing these things, okay? But that doesn't mean we're going to bully them. But yes, we are going to use some form of honesty, not coercion, not tricking, not bullying, honesty. Honesty, I think, solves it. But the world isn't a very honest place, is it? We're always encouraged to lie. And no offense, and don't take this like take it with a grain of salt. I think your tactic will encourage people to lie. Because
Um,
bullying often does. Ostracization often does. I will pretend I'm somebody else so people like me, which is a lie.
I think that even so, one, I don't think that they're lying. I think that if they're acting a certain way, that just is who they are. I think that like identities are like when you were talking about your consciousness, obviously there's not a way to like really categorize these things, but when we're talking about our identities, we can categorize them. We can use words to kind of say, I feel like I'm in close relation to this group or this label, this category of people. And when you do that, you start to become more and more like them just naturally, just because you are a social animal. You just end up doing these things. When you call it coercion, though, you're kind of begging the question that it's already a negative thing, when this is just how society has always existed. Social pressures have always existed. People have always wanted to be part of a group, and they've always wanted to belong. They've always wanted to feel accepted. And so creating rules on what it is that you find acceptable, and creating rules on what it is that you are allowing within your bubble, is how you kind of make those changes over time. I just don't believe that people are ever lying. I think that the things that they're doing is like, that is what makes them who they are, and they're doing those things because they believe them.
That's interesting. I think there's so much cognitive dissonance in the world that I don't think people are as aware of why they're doing certain things. And I'm much more lenient on people not knowing the why, which gives me a lot more leniency to people being radicalized. It's so easy to radicalize people. And it's only easy because you're right. Like maybe we want to be social creatures who adapt. So I think society's always been doing it wrong. I would argue that if I was to shift the narrative, it would be that we don't want to be a part of communities, that we only want to be a part of a cohesive outward community, but we don't actually want to strive to be part of a real community, because communities create slavery, communities create groupthink, communities create hate. I think it's much harder for an individual to be a force of evil in the world, though it's possible. Usually they need other people though, right? Hitler needed a group. Charles Manson needed a group. Like, it's very hard for an individual, though you could argue individuals like start the process, get the ball rolling.
Mhm.
So I would argue that I think society has always been doing it wrong by giving in to our social need to people please. I think that that is a bad quality in people, to want to be so a part of a group that they will lie, change, convince, brainwash themselves into believing like this is the place I need to be because at least I have friends. Which I think maybe is why I'm so hardcore about Build-A-Bear relationships. Because if you had a Build-A-Bear society, most of us, I think, would probably want to be left alone. But we don't do that because we can't feel like we can be left alone. We feel like we have to do something because otherwise someone's going to get the leg on us, and so we have to get the leg on them. But I am convinced that if people were left out alone, like as individuals, they wouldn't fall into Nazi traps, and they wouldn't get radicalized on YouTube, and they wouldn't think PewDiePie was a Nazi, and they would be able to think more nuanced about these subjects. You know what I mean? I just don't think we encourage the best in people, and I think the best in people doesn't include bullying outside of people like Sneeko and Pearl, who consent to it every day by being bullies themselves slash begging me to bully them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm like, look, somebody will say to me like, don't punch down. Okay, what does punching down mean? If I'm talking to a grown man who can't figure out he's a shitty partner, right? Am I punching down because he can't even figure out that much? Or am I talking to an equal? Who am I talking to right now? Like, what is that? right?
Mhm.
When am I punching down? Is it a Nazi, some 19-year-old kid who's so dumb enough to get radicalized by Nick Fuentes? Like, who raised you? Also, I have a brother who fucking loves Andrew Tate. How the fuck did that happen? And I'm like, how did that happen? What the fuck happened? Right? And it happened because even my parents, who I love so much, you should see them sometimes. I'm like, oh, you've been watching too much Fox News. I can hear it in your voice. I can hear it in people when they've been watching too much of somebody. And that is the moment because they want to be a part of a group. They've lost the relationship with their individual consciousness. But
I
like you
mean,
said, it's a part of their animal brain that wants them to do that, which is why I think society's always been wrong to give into that part of ourselves.
the I mean, you can be punching down on some levels and not on other levels. With people like Sneeko, you might be punching down on some sort of cognitive level, but you may not be punching down on the fact that he has a pretty big following and he's fairly influential on the people that follow him. And so it makes sense that like he has a level of responsibility there to where it makes sense that we're gonna say what we're gonna say about him.
Sure.
I don't think you say people want to be left alone, and I don't know that they actually do. Like, I would hope that you look at all of the people who influenced you throughout your life while you were getting to the place that you were getting. You made those decisions by yourself, but those weren't absent of all of the other influences. I
Of course.
appreciate
Of
all
course.
of the outside influences that were there for me.
Absolutely. I had
And
great
so,
mentors growing up. Hmm.
yeah, and so I was not left alone. I was never left alone. I was always being pushed. I was always being prodded. I was always being, directed in different ways. And I think that, especially early on, like being a drug addict, being a con man, being a Christian, being like a star athlete, being the popular kid, being the druggie, being like all of these different things where I lived very different lives and I was in very different bubbles over a short period of time, gave me the ability to kind of look back at all of that and think like, okay, I was a very different person so many different times, and
For
now
sure.
I'm an adult and I can't just keep changing. I can't just keep like moving from one place to another. I got to figure out who I am. I remember realizing that like adult men all have the same haircuts for the rest of their freaking lives, and women all change their hairstyles over and over. But adult men, like, they get a haircut and then that's it, and they just keep that freaking hairstyle forever. And I was like, I gotta figure out like what my haircut is and like who I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to look like, how I'm supposed to act. And I think it was like 23, 24 when I started doing all of this and just kind of like really changing who I was, not because people were telling me I had to do that, but because I wanted to be like a guy that I respected. I remember thinking of like, the type of woman that I would want to date. Who's the guy that she would respect? And I want to
Great
become
question.
that person. I want to
Great
be that
question.
guy. I like, but that ideal of who it is that she wants is not absent of societal influences. That is not absent of societal categories. I'm looking at those societal categories and I'm saying, I like those and I want to try to be those because that'll get me the acceptance that I want from the person that I want to be accepted by. I'm making
sure.
that decision like cognitively. Everybody may not be doing that, but they're still making the same decisions. They may not know that that's why they're making the decisions, but that they're all making the same decisions I did. I don't think because I knew I was doing that there was any more or less free will involved. We're all making the same decisions and we're all doing the same things. It's not absent of outside influences at any point.
Yeah, I think the way that I would describe my perception of my own relationship with like that is sort of like I want to live up to my own standard and mine alone. And then want to have relationships with people where I meet them where they're at and they try to meet me where I'm at, but I'm not trying to be anything for anyone but myself. And then by proxy, I will invite people into my life who allow me to be myself to the best of their ability, but then have boundaries because like no one can see every part of me except the person I decided to marry. And that's why I married him, because I feel like he sees like most of me, if not all of me. Like he understands me very well. Most of the world though has to like meet me where I'm at and I have to meet them where they're at, right? I think the person that I want to live up to is somebody who can talk to Sneeko and talk to Destiny and talk to all these people and meet them where they're at. So like I have to meet Sneeko where he's at. And right now, he's a guy who's throwing everything at the wall and being like, this is the answer. And I'm like, sure, ride with that for a while, buddy. See if it sticks. And Destiny is a person who says, like, I'm arrived. I figured it out. This is the answer, but I'm not going to walk the walk, right? Useless. At least Sneeko is saying, this is the answer, right? And I'm going to try to live by it. But then he doesn't live by it. And then he admits it. He'll like go on podcasts and be like, yeah, I cheated on the love of my life. And I'm like, holy fuck. He'll like admit it out loud. Abba will go and admit, I cheated on somebody. I was the bad guy. Like these people are having different relationships with everything, right? So I look at people and I say, okay, I'm going to meet you where you're at. I'm going to see that you're not ready to admit that, like, yeah, you are the shitty person in this story. Or, hey, I'm going to see that you are admitting you're the shitty person, but you're continuing to do other shitty things. Why is that? Like, why did we learn this lesson, but not this lesson? Why did we learn this thing, but not this thing? And then kind of meet them where they're at. Now, I do believe in free will, but I think you have to have a relationship with it. I don't think everyone has a relationship with their free will, which is why I do think people are called quote unquote bots or like this matrix thing that Andrew Tate talks about. Like he is a version of the matrix, right? We're all in bubbles. So there is no like matrix and there is no bot. But there are people who just don't have a relationship with their free will and they don't want to hold on to that responsibility. But also, I'm a little bit of a determinist. So I believe like we are determined by our genetics and our cards were dealt and the brain I was given to be limited. I believe you're born with a personality and you stick with that personality your whole life. I think you can have different relationships with that personality, but I think babies got personalities in the womb and out of it. I think you grow into that person. I think what you do change though, and I've had the same journey, is I've been like 20 different Britneys, like so many different Britneys. And it was almost like I was trying them on like a costume. Like, is this who I am? Is this who I am? And what I realized is like, I'm all those Britneys in one, but there's a primary version of myself. And that's usually the one I try to show on YouTube the most, right? Though I don't always do it well. But I am like a very specific kind of person. And I am a person who's trying to have a relationship with my literal consciousness myself. And society is secondary to me. And I think people usually try to have a relationship with society and they're second to society. And I think that's the flaw.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think to some point, you're always your subjective consciousness. Like, you are always that thing. You only have a reflection of society or the groups that you want to be a part of. Like, those are only making some changes in you, but they don't change your subjective conscious. Like, you're still making decisions by yourself. You're still going to look at things differently. We can go to a goth group where all of them look the same, but all of them think about things differently. They all have different perspectives. They're all going to be very different people down to the core. But it is the more like superficial things that we're talking about that are going to kind of change them, and those are going to be like the patterns that we see, and those are going to change like what it is that they're doing over and over. I saw somebody mention in chat that, like, you know, Tom said that he lied all the time, so why does he not think that these people are lying as well? Like, I'm not saying that they're not lying, or I think that you're lying more so with your words. I don't think that you're like, I don't think that people can pretend to be somebody else for long periods of time. Most people can't do that. It's a very hard thing to do for a short period of time. It's definitely not easy to do it for a long period of time. So when you're trying to fit in with groups, you're trying to be seen by these people, you're trying to be accepted. You're not like trying to be somebody else to be in those groups. You're trying to change yourself in certain aspects while being accepted in the other aspects at the same time. It's always going to be a combination of both.
Yeah, I think this is the hard part, right? Because if you're like I always say, like I love visiting bubbles and I love coming home to the one I made for myself. And I really encourage my audience, like if you want to make your own bubble, that's the question. Do you want to make your own bubble or do you want to be in a bubble? Because when you're in a bubble, though you're goth, there are different kinds of goths. And some goths expect you to act and think the same, whether or not they want to pretend otherwise. How many groups have I been a part of? And they're like, Brittany, you're not towing the line. And I'm like, yeah, I love that for you. But I can't. Like I remember I was up for a radio show in the conservative bubble and they were like, okay, you're going to be the conservative lesbian. Okay. And I was like, yeah, but what if I'm not a lesbian later? And they're like, what do you mean? It doesn't matter. In private, do what you want. But in public, you're always this thing. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this because I can't keep it up. But a lot of people in Talk Radio were. A lot of people in Talk Radio were doing a lot of really shitty things. And they had gay people at their parties and trans people and all these sex workers. But in public, they were advocating against the rights of those people, which is why, again, if you don't walk the walk, I don't want to hear it. Right. But the problem with that is that, like, they aren't lying, but they also think they're playing a game. The reason I give Sneeko some leniency is because, like, in his bubble, the game is lying. The game is money. The game Andrew Tate is playing is lying. That's the game, right? And so I can't fault Andrew Tate for wanting to be the best liar, but I can fault people for falling for the lie to an extent, right? Because a part of me is like, okay, guys, he's literally lying to you. Here's the proof. And they're like, no, I'm in on his game. I know Andrew Tate's not lying to me. He's just lying to the people like you. Sure, if everyone wants to play this game. But that's what I'm saying. I think everyone is lying to themselves when they're not willing to admit, like, people fall into categories. And for some people, they don't want to believe Sneako's lying, or that he is lying, but he's like consciously lying, or that he doesn't know it's wrong or it's right. It's like, none of this matters, okay? What matters is that you have to decide, who do you want to be and how do you want the world to be, and if that's even possible. And I don't think it's possible to ask the world to stop lying, even though I think you shouldn't lie. But I know way too many YouTubers that lie, way too many people that lie in my own family, and I know how easy it is to lie. It feels really good to lie, like you said. So I can't ask people to be held to my standard. Instead, I can say, I know why you're lying. Do you think you might want to change to be a person who doesn't lie outside of survival? Outside of like the Nazis at the door looking for the Jews, right? Which we're all going to lie in that situation, hopefully. Okay, to protect the people from dying. But again, I think we have to be careful about what we ask of society. I cannot ask society to give up lying without a reason, and the reason would be subjective. It's a construct of my own making. I think lying is bad. But why is it bad when it makes me millions of dollars? Why is it bad when I have a girlfriend? Why is it bad when our president does it? Why is it bad if the priests do it? Why is it bad if everyone lies? How do I explain that to somebody?
Do you believe in determinism at all?
I believe my theory is that everything is a little bit right. That if we combined all the right stuff from every bubble, we would actually have capital T truth, but we can't do that. So I think there's a little bit of determinism in terms of like genetics and our ability to make a path within those like constructs, not constructs, confines. And then there's free will, that relationship you're having with saying, I'm going to be different today. Even though I'm tempted to lie, I'm not going to lie. And then I'm going to handle the consequence of not lying.
I think, like, all of us growing up, the people who are alive today, if we all grew up like 500 years ago, we'd be insanely different people, right?
For sure.
Because we would have very different influences, even if we're the same subjective conscious. We're gonna be very different people, and so I don't like, I feel like you're separating who people are outside of those influences and whether or not they influence them to do the thing that that they ended up doing, whereas I think that they are almost one and the same. Like, you are subjectively choosing between a bunch of different influences, and each one is going to lead you down a very different road, and those roads are almost like predetermined to some extent, whereas you have other subjective choices that you can make down that road, but they're going to make dramatic changes over and over and over. And that, yeah, just the influence in and of itself, getting you to make a decision, is part of like what it sounded like you were kind of calling coercion before, or bullying, or things like that, whereas I just call these influences because they're kind of all the same.
Yeah, and this is my special uniqueness of neurodivergency, where like I am obsessed with categorization down to the T. So like we just had this discussion on my Discord where like somebody was like, look, there's just rock music and there's nothing else. I was like, no, there's like 100 subcategories of rock music, and like there's 100 categories of humans and how we experience life. So for me, like, Sneeko couldn't have been anyone but Sneeko. Okay. But the more he interacts with his consciousness, the more he actually asks himself the questions, the more he actually picks and chooses a path that is of his own and not of the bubbles, not of the influence, I think he would make different decisions. I do. And I think right now he's in denial of what he actually wants or needs, and is choosing what makes sense based off of the influence of those bubbles. And I think that that makes sense for his journey, right? Like, I get it. Like, you do you. It's causing a lot of harm in the process, including to himself and mostly to himself. And because I think we're all reflections of each other, like I could have been Tom and you could have been me, but like we are who we are. Like, I think Sneeko hurting himself is hurting other people. Hurting other people is hurting himself. But I also think like to understand this concept is to say that like I am unique and special. that I am more than the construct, I am more than the bubble. It's actually to say that the influence of the world is the trap, even though we're influenced by it. Like my mentors were very hands-off mentors, the ones I respected and loved were very much like, sure, Brittany, go fuck up. And they was like, cool. And they let me fuck up a lot. And then I would come back and be like, so I feel like that didn't work. And they're like, oh yeah, no shit. And I'm like, oh fuck. And then I just fucked up and fucked up until I didn't fuck up anymore. But I had to make the decision of like, I'm miserable. Something is wrong. When I got diagnosed with borderline, I went into the therapist's office and I was like, hey, something's wrong. And she's like, are you sure? And I was like, listen, something is wrong. Like, I am functional. I have a job. I have partners. I have friends, but something is crumbling. Like, I feel like I'm fighting myself every day. And she was like, And at first, it wasn't a great therapist. So I got a better one. And the second one was like, hey, let's go down the borderline path because I think you might have it. And I was like, okay, what is that? And then she explained it to me, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, what does that mean? Like, what does this mean for my life?" And once I understood what was wrong with my brain, I could categorize myself and be like, "Okay, Brittany, you're in this category. Don't listen to the internet." If I got the influence, Tom, of the internet with my borderline, I would have killed myself right there. You Google borderline, you hear borderline. Everyone is wishing my partner condolences for marrying me. They haven't even met him because he's marrying a woman with borderline. If I paid attention to the influences of the world, I would have no value and I would just kill myself. But I think people are valuable outside of the influence of the world. But they don't believe it, so they fall for Andrew Tate and they fall for religion and they fall for their constructs because at least they have a group. And I don't want, no offense, again, I don't want to be part of a group that doesn't actually allow me to pick them because I want to be here. Instead, they bully and push me in a direction so they have an easier day.
Sure,
Do
but
you know what
that's
I'm
not,
saying?
I don't even think that's most people on the internet. And I think that because of what's been normalized within society, you have the option to make that decision. Like when we look at people who were gay, a couple hundred years ago who weren't able to actually accept that they were gay and stayed in denial of it because,
For sure.
because it was not normalized. There weren't those
Right.
groups who could, help them be accepting of themselves. That like a lot of that is there's still groups where, so like my sister growing up in a very fundamental Christian family, like she still had enough outside influences where she was able to be accepting of her gayness and able to like marry another woman and all of those other things, whereas yeah, if she grew up a while ago where we hadn't advocated for those societies and normalized that acceptance, she wouldn't have been able to make that decision and would have been stuck with some sort of cognitive dissonance where all she
Right.
could do is just deny that she was gay in the first place. So I'm not
Right.
disagreeing on like the fact that you're going to make different decisions, that you're going to have your own subjective value and your own subjective interpretations of the reality that you're in, but you're also going to have a bunch of influences. And more than anything, I want to be a good influence on people. I want to influence
Yeah.
people and I want to be a good influence on them. I want to be somebody who actually helps them within society. I want to be somebody who actually like helps them integrate well and helps them have the most amount of friends, helps them be able to have a job where they're going to be stable. Like those are things that are only valued because society is constructed in the way that it is, and that's the world that we live in. Those are the things that we have to value, and so I would like to help people value those things.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Like I would say that you're helping people to survive in society, and I want to encourage people to live more, which is outside of society, while living in society, because you survive in society, right? If you're a minority, you're surviving. Like you're not living. Like the society doesn't care about you, and there's not enough of us for them to care about us, right? Like if the majority wins, and it often does, like they don't care. And I don't want to trick people into being pro-trans. I'm sick of all these liberal fucking white men, no offense, who like sit there and pretend they understand LGBT plight, but then when push comes to shove, they're just as fucking homophobic and transphobic as the rest of them. So I don't want anyone who's tricked. I want people who genuinely realize, like, oh shit, yeah, who cares? Be gay, be trans, be whatever, don't
Hmm.
care. But to get there, they have to have a real relationship with their own consciousness, which I think, again, is asking a lot of society to do because it's very scary to deconstruct everything, to possibly lose all your friends, to possibly lose all the people in your life. Like, again,
I
you
think
have
you're
to be
making it
willing.
sound a lot deeper than it really is, because when we look at studies that actually make people accepting of these groups, it's just them being around them and seeing that they're normal people, and
See
then they
that, but say
totally
that to
change
my
their
family.
perspective of it.
Say that to my family who raised 3 gay kids. Say that to my family that is around their siblings who loves them. We go home every day for the holidays or all the time. I call my mom like every day. Like my
Well,
brother.
okay, they may not have changed whether or not they think it's a sin, but you may have changed the way that they actually think of gay people, right? My parents never
True.
would have been around a gay person before. Then all of a sudden
Okay, true.
their daughter's gay. Now they're willing to be around her. They're willing to, like, a
They're
lot of things they're compromising on pretty quickly just by
That's
interacting with
awesome.
somebody who's gay, right?
Are they willing to have her partner at home with them?
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh, my parents are not. They're not there. So my parents not there. You can't talk
Okay.
about it. When I was dating women, I couldn't even
Her
bring it up.
partner won't come over, but my parents
Good.
are willing to
Yeah, I
have
get
the, yeah.
that. I get that. See, that's interesting. No, I think she probably should go over, right? Because like that's better. That's kinder. Ooh, that's
I think
interesting.
it would
See?
be better, especially now that they had a kid, and my
Oh,
parents
that's
think that
great.
they're like
Congrats.
grandparents and they're super
Oh,
excited
that's so.
about it
Oh, that's
because
gay. That's so
none of the
sweet.
rest of us have had kids, and so now
Oh,
the gay
that's sweet.
couple
That's
are the
hard though.
ones that made
Yeah,
them grandparents, and my parents
yeah.
are like very invested in that child, and the
That's so
one,
sweet.
the
Yeah.
partner has kind of cut them off. So yeah.
That's hard. Okay, that's a hard. If she called me, I'd be like, okay, girl, what's the plan? What's our goal with this? What do we want to do? Are we creating a cohesive existence so our kid knows that everyone's different? Or are we going to ostracize the religious like they ostracized us? And then that's the
That's
question,
That's what it is.
right?
It is
That's the
like she's
question.
religious again. They're both very religious. Yes, I know. But they're upset that, like, my parents were a bit harder on my sister when she was trying to come out, and she grew up in a family that was very accepting of her when she was coming out.
Sure.
She's black. She grew up in a black family. Somehow
Yeah.
it's odd to me that the black Christian family was more accepting of gay people than the white
It
Christian
happens.
family, but
Damn.
it is,
Damn.
yeah, we live in a world of contradictions, I
Love it.
suppose.
Love it.
But yeah, it's a weird situation, but my parents have become a lot more tolerant because of their
Yeah.
interactions with somebody who's gay. And so that doesn't change whether or not they think it's a sin. They're not compromising on their values, but they are
Okay. Okay.
compromising on what it is that they're willing to engage with.
That's cool. That's really dope of your parents, actually. That's actually, if I could get my parents to that point, I feel pretty like accomplished, but we're not close to that yet.
Mhm.
My siblings are all basically there, but my parents are they're having a hard time. They had a hard time with him. They had a hard time the fact that I was dating an atheist. Like they really struggled. They're like, oh, I can't. Aren't you gonna end up with a nice Catholic boy? I was like, not gonna.
But
I
I
would
mean,
drive a
maybe
Catholic
your
man
parents
crazy.
are an anomaly, but like overall, studies show that that is like the most common way for people to get used to other
Yes.
people, which is why when I talk about my community and de-radicalizing people from both far left, far right, like
Yeah.
these are what matters is that they're able to engage with other
Mm.
people, humanize them, see them as real
Mm-hmm.
people, see that they're normal,
Mm.
see that they're able to have conversations with them, that they have real problems like everybody else, and they kind of like start to view them very differently, and will change accordingly. And lots of them are still like, there's still a bunch of people in my community who are still very far right, but
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
they're using pronouns for trans people. Like
That's nice.
it's like there are just small steps here and there,
That's
or
great.
just being more accepting but keeping all of your like values. Like there's a spectrum here of how
Yeah.
people find the commonalities there.
Okay, can I tell you the thought that came to mind is like, okay, one of the dilemmas of my work is like when I say humans are going to human, it's meant to help the individual not freak out and want to like, oh my god, the world. I'm like, humans are going to human, relax. Like everyone's doing what they think is right. Everyone's kind of crazy. It's fine, breathe. But like I did go through a stage and I struggle with this now. We're like, yeah, I've hung out with Sneeko. He's like online. He's really nice. I've hung out with Destiny. He's really nice. I hung out with Abba. He's really nice. Everyone's really nice. Everyone I meet is really fucking nice. And I don't want to judge them for their stupid path because it's so dumb to me, but god damn it, like they're so nice and wonderful and they're humans and they have struggles like everyone else. And so I become desensitized to them. I
Hmm.
become desensitized to not Nick Fuentes, he's so annoying to me. But like I probably would if I had Nick over. Like that's a problem. If I talk to Andrew Tate, if that ever happened, online, I just like he makes me have feelings. But if I was in front of him, I'd be like, "What's up?" And he'd be like, "Hey, what's up? You want some food?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do want some food." And then we'd eat and smoke a stogie, and I'm like, "Andrew Tate's kind of nice." Damn it! And that's the problem. Is like, what does it mean when I can humanize everyone, but I know they're like advocating for my limited rights. They're advocating against my civil rights. Like, what does it even mean when I can humanize everyone? And so then you ask me, like, what do I want for society? I want society to stop shoving their their nose in people's business. Because if Andrew Tate would just leave me alone, but Andrew Tate thinks he's inspiring, he thinks he's doing the same thing you're doing, inspiring men to be better. He's a
Well,
good person.
you realize that the fundamentalist Christians would say the same thing, though. They would say that
Totally.
like
Absolutely.
normalizing gay marriage is going to make it to where there's more likely to be gay people and trans people running around, and now LGBTQ stuff is in their classrooms, and you
True.
know
True.
you're not letting them mind their own business. You're invading their lives, and so no matter what, living in a society, that's the way things are going to be. Everybody has to interact with
True.
one another, and we have to try to make the best of it in the process. And so
Yeah.
yeah, like trying, I think, using liberal values and enlightenment values, and kind of like hoping that your country and that your society embodies those values, is the way that the most amount of people are going to be able to be individuals and get along at the same time.
I agree with that. I do. I do agree with the spirit of that, absolutely. I guess yeah, I do. I mean, I can't say that I don't agree with that, right? Like I try to advocate for the individual, but then again, because of the way we talk, like even you'll watch a video of mine and be like, Brittany's not nuanced. And I'm like, fuck. But the problem is like I can't be nuanced if I'm also giving an opinion. Like I remember there was a time in my Discord where everyone's like, Brittany, I'm sick of you saying humans are gonna human. What is judge somebody, please? And I was like, okay, cheaters should die. And they were like, no, not them. And I was like, okay. Like nobody's ever gonna be happy when we put down our foot on what we think should happen. I don't think cheaters should die. I just think like gaslighting your partners into thinking nothing's happening while you're secretly having an affair is
Cheating's pretty
crazy.
bad. Yeah, cheating's
It's
pretty bad.
crazy.
It's pretty bad.
It's crazy. But then I think everyone's also imagining different things. Like when I say cheating, I think people are thinking like, oh, I messaged a girl on Instagram. And I'm like, okay. Like, I don't know what that means, but like, let's have a. So I think that's always going to be the struggle is like, look, I want the world to be better, but like, what does that mean? I don't even know if it means anything. I feel like I'm not saying anything of value when I say I want the world to be better.
Yeah, not
Doesn't
that
mean
in and of
anything, right?
itself. Like if I just say good people should do good things and they shouldn't do bad things, like obviously
Yeah,
that
like,
doesn't mean anything. But I
right.
think that I'm capable of going into more detail. I think you're capable of going into more detail, describing why you think something's right or wrong.
Sure.
Why you think that's going to, if everybody did this, this would make a better world. Like I think that we're capable of doing these things, and that doesn't mean that in the process I'm alienating the people who aren't doing those things, because those people are still in my community. Those people are still showing up to chat, because when I talk about the people who are alienating them, they feel seen in those moments, right? They feel
Yeah.
like when I'm going
Yeah.
off on some progressive or some socialist, like because of the way that they're talking about Christians or conservatives or neo-Nazis and how they're misunderstanding them, like they feel seen in those moments. And same with the opposite side. Like, and so that's I think that like that is part of it, is just like I'm sitting somewhere in the middle advocating for something very different while being accepting of kind of everybody on the spectrum.
Yeah, for sure. I hold on, I had a thought in my head, but I have to pee so bad, so that's also what I'm thinking about. Hold on. Wait, spectrum, advocating, can't get it right. Fuck. How did it go?
It went very well. Did you remember?
Yeah. Yes, okay. So, I want to pass this or I want to go over this thought with you, but of course like this is a thought experiment. Everybody slow down. Okay, so I'm curious. If somebody asked me like what do you think genuinely, like what do you think would benefit the world to the nth degree, like the most degree? I would say technically everybody not stopping having babies. Everybody. Even though I'm a hardcore belief that like we should never regulate who has a baby, right? Even though I have thoughts about that. Okay. And I would say we should work on improving the lives of the people that exist right now. And every time we bring a new baby into the world by forcing a person into existence and forcing their consciousness to have to deal with life and pay taxes, annoying, okay? We are taking resources away from improving the lives of the people who live here. But of course, because I come from a religious pro-life background, the answer to that is usually, but one of those people could be Martin Luther King Jr. One of those people could be Barack Obama. One of those people could be a cure for cancer. So we can't stop babies from existing because one of those babies is going to save the world, right? But my thought process is like, the reason I don't want to prescribe is because I think all of my solutions are a little bit too black and white, right? I'm like, stop having babies, help the people that exist. And they're like, no, that's not an answer. I'm like, okay, eradicate humanity. No pain. They're like, no. And I'm like, okay. So like, I just think like by existing, we are harm. Like our existence is harm, right? It's harm to an animal, it's harm to the planet, it's harm to each other. But there's also a lot of joy and wonderful, like there's so much wonderful, beautiful, like meaning in life. Like Vervaeke talks about the meaning crisis. I don't know if you've ever seen it on YouTube. It's amazing. He's a philosophy professor. Great series on the meaning crisis. Like there's a meaning crisis happening in the world, and there's so much meaning to be found. But I do think that all of my solutions are a little bit too like focused on who exists now.
It's funny
Right?
when you walked away, my chat was saying that your ideology aligns too much with the Third Reich, and then you come back talking about genociding humanity. So that's a little
I don't know much about the
ironic,
Third
but
Reich, to be honest with you, but like I know the concept, right? But yeah, I'm pretty high individualistic, so I don't know if they're like that. But I don't like groupthink. It makes me frustrated because I think everyone always suffers. Like, okay, how do I live in a world where I don't have to eradicate Andrew Tate?
mhm.
By letting him exist, so letting him cause harm.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. You can only try to change things to where people like him are less likely. People like
Right,
him will always exist, and that's fine. And
right.
like, you have to be accepting of the fact that people that you're unhappy with will always exist, while always trying to make it happen as little as possible.
Mm,
There's like, even, I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to get into that, but I was gonna
yeah.
say like I was gonna get into like distribution of resources, but that's a totally different conversation. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's but anyways, yeah, like people that I'm unhappy with, people who I disagree with will always exist. I disagree with you a whole lot. There's a lot of there's probably like two or three different streams of yours where I've had very large disagreements, and I think all of them were semantic disagreements where I felt like you're hearing somebody else say something that is insanely different from what I felt like they were saying, or
mm-hmm.
things like that. And so I'm like accepting. It's kind of like when Christians say like hate the sin but love the sinner sort of
Yeah,
thing. Like, I know that most people, I'm going to disagree with them on probably most things, but that doesn't mean that I have trouble with them existing, and
right.
I'm going to just do my thing, advocate for my stuff,
Mm.
try to change the world the best way that I can. I'm at peace with that, and trying to do that while also acknowledging that like I'm unhappy with those things, but that doesn't mean that I'm actually like unhappy as a person.
I agree with that. So that's how I see myself. But then here's the question. Because I think once you start prescribing, you're basically, in order for it to be something that you can convince people is reasonable, you also have to convince them that what they're doing is wrong, which means you have to literally, possibly in political circles, demonize, right? Demonize those people so people don't want to be like them. Like you were saying earlier, right? Like slave owners bad, which is true. Like I agree, slave owners super bad. But also, like in order to, I don't know if we should move people slowly. Like with my parents, I need to move them slowly, but I have no hope of them actually ever becoming like pro gay or something. That's not something I hold on to. What I hold on to is just getting them to the point where they don't want to vomit every time a homosexual walks down the street. Like that'd be great. You know, if I could get them to a point where they're not freaking out if we have like a trans grandkid, which by the way, they probably would. And so the question is like, if we're moving people slowly, are we also moving slave owners slowly? Are we also moving rapists slowly? Are we also moving Andrew Tate slowly? Are we also moving Sneeko slowly? Who gets our compassion? Who do we have to be patient with? And who do we have to like eradicate? And I keep using that word, but I mean, what are the options? If we're bullying people out of like social structures, we are eradicating them from society. We are putting them in a death sentence. So,
Um, Maybe to some extent, like I think that stigmatizing actions is one thing, and I think that this is where the left goes a little bit too far, is where they'll
mm,
stigmatize like entire people, entire
mm,
groups of people, and I think that when you do that, you're actually going to get pushback now. Like, you're not actually stigmatizing the thing anymore. You're martyring them, and now you're giving them like a cause to fight for. So like, I think the trans movement has done this pretty highly with, trans women are women. If you don't use their pronouns, you're murdering them. Like,
right,
all those
right.
sorts of things. Like, they went way too far with it to they're uh where they're obviously going to get a whole lot of pushback, and a lot of people are going to start to fight when if you had done it very differently and like in incremental levels, that you might not have gotten the same pushback. It may not be the major platform for the Republican Party right now, is just how much, you know, just a whole lot of virtue signaling about how much they hate trans people. Like, it's there's saying that I want to stigmatize things doesn't mean that this is like that just like going full, you know, head down, running through brick walls, just trying to stigmatize anything and everything I don't like. But like, there's a process to it. There's an even medium in there where, like, you know, a sweet spot to where hopefully you're actually getting the change that you're looking for, that people are able to assess this and be accepting of it, and they're not going to like resist super hardcore because they feel like they're being, like you were saying earlier, where they're being bullied or where they're being coerced. Like that, once it gets to that point, then yes, people are going to fight back pretty hardcore.
Yeah, I definitely think most of the spirit of what you say, like, I do agree with. I think obviously it always gets down to method. Like, what is the methods we're using to move people? Like, I used to be in the politics and I thought like this was the answer. And I used to think like, I'm gonna like advocate and protest. I'm gonna be on the streets. But I was noticing like I'm not making any like positive change here. I'm just like in a bubble that reinforces my belief system, and everyone's kind of angry at everybody, and everyone's angry that I'm talking. Like, I remember when I first started talking to like the Destiny orbiters and everybody, and Destiny himself, like my progressive friends, some of them were so mad at me. And I was like, why are you mad at me, bros? And they're like, don't talk to him. And I was like, first of all, don't tell me what to do. Feminism didn't work this hard for you to tell me what to do with my life. Like, that doesn't work that way, okay? But like, also, like, what does that mean? Like, what is the relationship we're having if you don't see me, Brittany, as the consciousness that I am? I'm a person who usually talks to everybody. Now I have my limits. For some reason, I genuinely, it's interesting that I'm talking to you. I don't understand like the racism bubble very much. Like, I'm maybe because I'm Assyrian, so I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, I've always lived between two worlds of being white and like person of color, so I don't really understand like anything. But at the same time, like, they must need somebody to bridge that gap as much as anybody else, right? I just don't know how to do it. I'd rather work with the homophobes so I can try to get them to be more chill. But again, like, what does that look like? It looks like time. And if we need time, some of us are going to die before anything changes. And we can't spend our whole life doing it. We have to get what we can get, and then we have to live our lives at some point, right? Like,
but
one of the reasons
that is a black and white thought process again, where like, yes, I'm not spending every second of every day just doing this. Like, even when I'm online, I don't really do politics very much. Like, I don't talk about politics very much. Like, most of what I do is like drama coverage and debates and stuff like that. But I think a lot of drama coverage is like looking at the way the individuals are acting, learning from their behaviors, like assessing it, talking about what they did right, what they did wrong. Like, we're talking about morals, we're talking about ethics, we're doing philosophy when we're doing these things. And I think that these are ways that like individuals are going to learn better, is watching individuals mess up, and the people, each person watching, seeing somebody do this, and then seeing my reaction and a bunch of other streamers' reactions online to where they see like, oh, people don't like that. People are going to freak out if I do that. I probably shouldn't do that thing. Like, see, that's a good process.
Where does that line of thinking come from? Like, I maybe because, again, I don't care what people think. So like, I can't process this. Like, I care what the people I care about think, but I don't care what anyone, if you're not in the sphere of Brittany cares about you, I literally hear your comments and goes, whoop, whoop. And I'm like, oh, no, which is why, like, I've been on the internet for 12 years. I can't get bullied off. Like, it's not going to happen.
Most people's jobs aren't on YouTube. They have to work in workplaces. They have to go to family events. They have to, like, those people may not be they're like the people that they choose to hang out with, but those are people they have to hang out with. They have to get along with. They have to be seen in a decent light by, like, most of us can't just choose to only interact with people online or, you know, stuff like that. Like, we don't choose all of the people that we have to engage with or the people that have to like us. My boss may not like me very much, and I need them to like me in order for me to progress in my job. So I do a lot to make sure that they like me. I don't want the other employees being upset with me. I want them to like me, because otherwise they'll go talk crap about me to my bosses, and then I'll be seen as a problem in the workplace. Like, I might not get invited to family events or to parties if other people who I may not like, if they don't like me, now I'm not getting to go like share those experiences with other people that I do like it's best if there are people who like me and I'm seen in a certain light. I don't get to pick and choose every person that I want to like me. Sometimes I just have to do my best to be liked by as many people as possible.
Yeah, maybe I come from a like I'm thinking of my friends who have like actual jobs and they have to go to work. They keep work and stuff very separate. So like when they go to work,
Hmm.
they're work self, and then they come home and they actually have their family and friends, and they don't overlap those things. Coworkers don't know their real friends, and
Hmm.
when coworkers are like, "Hey, I want to hang out with you," they're like, "No, we're not friends, bro. We're coworkers." So maybe it's that too, where like, yeah, you want to be liked, but you're not actually being liked for yourself. You're being liked as a good employee. So what does that have to do with like you just have to be good at your job. People like you. Like, or there's going to be drama no matter where you go anyway. So like in my head, it doesn't matter, right? There's drama everywhere. So a part of me is like not understanding the desire to like being a good community member to me is not about being liked. It's about being useful.
It's both. Well, like nobody wants to use you if they don't want you around, right? Like it's the like when I'm on the internet, okay, there are certain groups of people who are like have an obsession with not liking me and are like very dishonest in the way that they engage with me and my community. I don't care what those people think about me. Those people are not a priority to me whatsoever. Like I think so little of them that I couldn't possibly care what they think about me. There are other people who I respect, who I care about, who if they thought poorly of me, that would matter to me. But
Mm,
but then there's other places where like I didn't choose my parents, I didn't choose my brothers and sisters, but these are people that I'll ride or die for,
mm,
and I didn't choose that. That's just kind of the way it is. Like these are people
mhm,
that I want to like me, that I want to get along with, that I want to be able to like enjoy their company. I want them to enjoy my company. And then it's the same at work. If I'm causing problems, if I'm causing drama, if I'm an issue, like they're not going to want me there, even if I'm really good at a job. I'm not just a cog in a system. I'm also a person, and I'm around
mm,
other people who have human feelings and desires, and their own subjective nature makes it to where they could very much not want me there, and I could be the best at my job and they'll still get rid of me or stop me
for sure.
from moving up or something like that,
Mm,
just because I'm an unlikable person.
mm. Maybe it's my semantics problem. So if what I usually tell people is like I would never tell somebody like be liked. I would tell people like get along. You don't have to like anyone, but get along.
Somewhat. I mean, you're not going to get along. Like, okay, let's say I go to work and we got a new black boss and the other employees are talking about how much they don't like them, and I'm like, yeah man, freaking black people, I hate them, right? Like this guy's probably like a criminal and has 20 baby mamas and blah blah blah, right?
Mm,
Like they don't like him for other reasons, but now that they think
mm,
I'm racist, now they really don't
mm.
like me, right? Like now I'm somebody that
Yeah.
they probably don't want to be around, and they're going to be uncomfortable around me for a ton of different reasons. And so
Mm,
this is it's not as simple as like just getting along, because I might get along with them just fine, but I make them uncomfortable now, right? I make it to where, yeah, they don't feel comfortable around me. Like you
I
and
think
me might be very accepting of a bunch of different groups of people, but
yeah.
most people obviously aren't like that.
Yeah, I think in my head maybe it's a when I say get along, I mean don't talk about not liking people. I mean, be strategic about like who you create an enemy out of work and be careful about who you gossip about. Even though like girl, I've been there, done that. I've worked normal jobs, right? Outside of YouTube. I have only made YouTube my real career for like 3, 4 years. So like I've always had an outside job, right? I've always worked with coworkers and had drama is just everywhere, girls. Like everywhere is insane. But it is, and it starts with like you sharing an opinion that you might have or venting to somebody, and someone takes that to somebody else, and all of a sudden there's this whole thing. But then you have to like, I don't know, I've had so many team meetings working at also mostly grocery stores, and then I was a nanny. That's like my jobs. And I would always be like, okay, we're just gonna get along now. See how the drama has gotten too much? We're not doing our jobs. We have to get along now. Maybe because I'm like blunt neurodivergent, like I will literally just tell people, including my bosses, like, hey, we're not getting along, fix it, or like I'm out, right? Because like this is
Hmm.
a minimum wage job, dude. I'll get a new one. And so like I'm just too rebellious, I think. in nature. Like I don't know what it is, but I don't know. Again, it's probably just like a difference of categories of people. Like I don't know, understand the idea of wanting to be liked versus just wanting to like be good at my job. Like you don't have to like me, dude, but I'm good at my job. So like, what are you gonna do about it? Like I don't
I
know.
mean,
Don't
it
you ever
depends
keep
on
people
the
around that you
job.
don't?
Like some jobs you have to work in groups and you have to work on
Yeah,
teams,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then in other
And
groups you
that,
don't.
yeah.
So, or
To
other
be
jobs you
fair,
don't. So yeah.
that's fair. That's super fair. To be fair, like to be honest, I'm not that category. Like even in high school, I would beg teachers not to put me on group activity. I'm like, please, please take me off this. I can't work with people, and they would still make me do it, and I hated it because I always felt like I was pulling everyone's weight, and I hate that feeling of like being the only one trying. I hate it. It's the worst feeling in the world. It makes me like want to die,
Like
and
what
that's
I
how I feel
do,
about society. By the way.
I'm in charge of a lot of people, and early on when I started getting put into uh, like management roles, or
Mm,
yeah, I didn't think it mattered whether or not they liked me. I was just telling them like,
mm,
this is just your job. I said you have to do it, therefore you have to do it. And that's like true and all, but it also makes things a lot harder when people don't do what they're told because they don't like you, and they fight you because they don't like you, and then you got to
mm,
go get a new employee and try it all over again. And so eventually, like, it just starts to matter whether or not they like you. It is the
mm.
smoothest way of getting things done. And there's tons of things with HR and like classes
Yeah.
at all corporations that I work for where they try to tell you how to get along with people and the types of
Mm.
things that you should or shouldn't say, and things you should or shouldn't do. Like, getting along within a corporate environment is insanely important, and
Yeah.
it's like, unless you're just sitting at a computer by yourself with a headset on all day, not really talking to anybody else, and all of your interactions coming through email. Like, otherwise humans are very weird people, and we need to get along with others, otherwise we're gonna cause complications.
Yeah, I think there's definitely is something where like this is my limit. Like I don't understand. I don't want to say group dynamics, but I really don't. Like, were you around? This is not me. This is great. I love this. When Wick had me on his show and people called in and told me how they didn't like me, and I was like, this is great. But it was one of those things where like they're like, you have to talk like this because this is what we do to make people comfortable here. I was like, yeah, I just don't want to be here then. And they were like, but you are
So
here. And I was like,
wait, was that what they scheduled you for? Was like for people to come on and tell you why they didn't like you, or was it
no, no,
just like a
no, no. Wick,
Q&A thing and that's what
Wick
happened?
Wick has this great, I love how Wick does. This is my favorite thing about his content is he does the interview and then he allows people to come in and talk to you.
Hmm.
It's like the coolest thing ever. It's
I
it's
do the same
awesome.
thing. Yeah.
I love that energy and like I'm like I love that. So that's what it was. It's like him and I talked about my levels and bubbles and stuff and then he brought people on to talk to me and I love that. I want to do that every day. Like I love that. But there's something about this narrative that I keep hearing from people, but they're like, but you have to get along. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get along to the best of my ability, but not if I don't have to. So if I'm in a job where I have to get along, I'll play a game, bros. But I am playing a game, right? Like my real personality isn't coming out here. But that's why I think I also work with a like highly neurodivergent audience. Is like they're always coming to be like, okay, Brittany, what game is this? It's like, okay, so they want you to do this, I think. And like we're always looking at the neurotypicals and how they do things in their group activities, and we're like, okay, this is super weird. Why
When
are
you
we
say
doing
you're
it this
playing a
way?
game, you mean like you're putting on like a professional hat or something, right?
Right.
Like, I
I'm trying
think
to
part of
be
what people are saying is that you have to have that ability. Like, not
yes.
you, obviously nobody gets along with everybody, but
Right.
everybody should have the ability to get along when they choose to. They should be
Mm.
able to like mend and mesh when it's time and when it's necessary.
Yes. And so I think like yes, you want to be liked at work, but I think in my brain, if you said that to me, I'm like, I don't care about being liked. So it's not a value of mine. But if you told me like you have to get along with people in order to get the better raise to be successful, I'd be like, oh, I care about that. That I care about. How do I do that? You know what I mean?
I
But I
don't
don't care if I'm liked as the consciousness that is me.
I don't want to be offensive.
Yeah.
I had a girlfriend whose mom was who had BPD,
Mm,
and she went like a very long time just without friends and all of these
mm.
things, and like her daughter ended up being like her best friend and raised her as her best friend. It was like a very unhealthy
Yeah, I hate that.
dynamic. And
Yeah, making your kids your friends is weird, bro.
but like, obviously the like biggest part of BPD is having trouble gaining relationships, and
Hmm.
like you may end up with a mentality of like, I don't care who likes me, like I you know, like me, accept me for who I am, or fuck off. Like, do you think that that's a part of that dynamic? Is that like you went through a period where you had trouble getting people to like you, and so you just had to come into like acceptance of that?
Everybody loves me. I've never had a problem with people dating me, liking me, people giving me promotions. People like me. They don't
See,
always like me.
then I have trouble even believing that you don't
They
actually
don't,
care whether or not people
well,
like you, if everybody likes you. Like, if
they
you're,
like the version of me. They like the part of me they get along with. They don't like the whole version of me usually. That's why I have an inner circle. So I have like three non-related friends to me. They're like ride or die. We've all known each other 10, 20 years. We love each other. And then I have my family. And that's it. That's all I have spoons for. Everyone else I love is amazing. I hope I know these people for a time. Like Irrelevant and I was like, I wonder how long I'll know Irrelevant. Like I like him so much, but I don't know how long I'll know him, right? Like I
Mhm.
like you. How long will I know Tom? I don't know. But I already am set for friends. So like I'm never looking for new ones. But I'm honored when people want to get along with me, when we have something in common. Like I have a bunch of BDSM friends, I have a bunch of political friends, but like they don't really always like me in my full consciousness, which I think is fine because like again, I think that's like pretty rare to have somebody who likes you for exactly who you are versus like what you have in common.
Mhm.
I think most people are settling for friendships in which they have things in common.
I think
And
it's a
I
lot
just
more
don't need to
common
do
with
that.
men. Men build bonds over commonalities. Like, they play video games together, they go play
Mm.
sports together, they watch the same TV show, they're in the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
fantasy
yeah.
football league. Those sorts of things for men, like just spending time around each other, is what creates a bond. Whereas for
Yeah.
women, they have a more like intimate bond with one another, where they actually like share intimate information and talk about their feelings and talk about what they did that day. And like, they have very different types of bonds with one another from men, to where
Yeah.
like what you're talking about, where it's like about commonalities, that's insanely true for like all men, but
Yeah.
not as true for women. Like, women have to have that intimate part there in order
Mm.
to feel any sort of connection with you at all.
Yeah, I think that's like the joke of why people call me a boy. Like the literally even my partner, he's like, you're the man in the relationship. Because like I mean, I was raised around boys my whole life. My dad raised me as a boy. That's why he thought I was gay. Literally. He goes, oh my God, is it because I raised you as a boy? I was like, no. Like that's
What
not why
does
I'm
that mean
queer.
as a boy? Like, to have boy interests, or what?
Yeah, like he basically didn't he treated my sister like a girl. And he treated me like a boy. So anything he did with his sons, he basically invited me along. Anything that the boys did, I did. Anything that the boys were into, I was into. And then I was a tomboy my whole life. Like I definitely started becoming femme way later in my life, and I'm barely femining it out. Okay, I wear earrings, and I'm like, oh, look at me, girl. But like, you know what I mean. So I will say that I think I'm an anomaly
Boy.
in a lot of ways. And also my borderline does contribute to how my brain works, as does like my neurodivergency in
Sure.
general. I'm so close to getting tested for ADHD and autism. Like I'm
I
so
have extreme
convinced.
ADHD.
Like I am so convinced at this point, but I don't know like what it could be. There's definitely something that makes my brain work the way it does. And also I've been othered my whole life. Well, everyone tells me they like me, and it's confusing. My whole life people are like, Brittany, you're so wonderful. We want to hang out with you. But if you would just change. Brittany, we like you. But if you would just change. And I'm like, this is confusing.
Hmm.
And so I decided instead I was just going to embrace the things that I liked about myself and invite people in with their consent in mind. Like, hey, this is how I am. Is that okay? How do you feel about that? I hope it's good enough. And if it's not, I understand. But I'm just used to people wanting to be around me. But then I think they get upset when I turn. Like I remember I had a friend who was like, "Be more critical," and I was like, "Okay." And then I turned it on him. He's like, "Not at me," and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like now I'm confused, and I just think it's like probably my neurodivergency. But yeah, I'm incredibly self. I'm just very happy with who I am, and I've worked really hard to be this person. I've worked hard to find the bonds that I have. I worked really hard to find my husband. I went on a lot of dates, let me tell you. I worked really hard, and I think that started with me accepting that like I'm a little different, but I'm still a person. And from what I see from basically everyone is like everyone wants to be liked, but I think it's always for the wrong reason. And everyone wants to be liked if they just change a little bit. And I'm wondering, can I live in a world where I don't have to change so much? But I could the change I could orchestrate is like maybe better manners sometimes, which I try to do, but then don't ask me a direct question.
Like, I'm pretty malleable. I'm willing to change, like, for certain instances, to make people
Mm,
more comfortable, to make people
mm,
happy. Like, I'm I'm a pretty malleable person, and like my actions and the way that I'm gonna get along with other people. I don't mind
Yeah.
those sorts of changes when
Fair.
for the most part. But I okay, I think some of the stuff that you said earlier about like people lying now, I think
Mm.
makes sense because you were talking about like their beliefs versus their actions, like what it is
Yeah.
that they believe. Their actions may not actually portray their beliefs. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's actually like insanely normal that not everybody's beliefs always like especially cognitive dissonance, I think, is very normal as
Mm.
well, right? I went a long time where I probably did not believe in God whatsoever, but anytime the
Mm.
thought of wondering of whether or not I believed in God crept into my head, immediately I was like, I'm not supposed to do that. Like, get out of here. Like, you're not
Fair.
supposed to be there. I'm not allowed to have that thought. I'm not allowed to think about that. That's bad. And so like that cognitive dissonance was definitely there for a long time.
Yeah.
When even when we talk about what we believe, it's hard to like say what that is without us categorizing it, without us putting into some sort of
Mm.
like linguistic, like socially constructed label so that we
Totally.
can understand it. And so even like I don't know how to say that there is this objective thing that I actually believe outside of like, what I think I believe or the way that I've categorized what I believe. Like these are all so linear that I think that like the closest we can get is just understanding ourselves and then being able to convey that information to other people. And so
Mm.
yeah, I don't like the cognitive dissonance is like one of the most natural things that everybody has to be a part of. So yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think that's why it feels like again, I think like people are so lonely because like we don't know, we want to be seen. Like we want to be understood for like who we are, but it's so hard to be seen when you are like trying to be a part of society because society kind of breaks down the moment we're all trying to cater to the individual parts of ourselves. Did you cover that girl the time the ADHD girl who's not ADHD, the time
Oh
what's that
yes,
called?
time blindness. Yes.
Yeah, time blight. Did you cover her in your content? What was your opinion on her as an example?
I mean, I thought that was wild. Like, obviously, I'm assuming it was her mom who was with her.
Yes,
Sounded
it was.
pretty rude and abusive and like crazy. If that's actually how she reacted, I have
Mm-hmm.
trouble believing that's actually how she reacted, and that this girl was
Mm-hmm.
probably hyperbolizing the entire scenario. But
Mm.
yeah, I think that like I said, I have extreme ADHD. I don't expect others to change standards for my time blindness, if that's what we're calling it, because
For sure.
like there's other ways for me to adjust. Like I can set alarms, I can use a watch, I can use my phone, there's all sorts of things that I can do to adjust to everybody else instead of expecting everybody else to adjust to me.
For sure. So, okay, my opinion was a little different because I have people in my life who also have ADHD, but they have time blindness problems, and their jobs did actually have an option for them. And I was like, "Oh, cool, a company that had an option for them and their time blindness." And I knew about this like a while ago in comparison to when the video came out. And so when it came up, I was like, "Oh yeah, there are jobs that do that." And then everyone's like, "No, there's not." And I was like, "No, there are jobs. Like there are real jobs that do that because I know
Like
someone who has a
working from home.
working from home and not having to clock in 9 to 5. They have a whole
Hmm.
24-hour cycle. So they
Yeah.
have like cuz the work they need to get done is like it's different. So I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." And to think like for me, I'm like, "Oh, how can we make this like a thing? Like how can we get this girl a job that makes sense for how her brain works?" Like I always thrived in nannying cuz parents loved me. I'm good with kids. I raised all my freaking siblings. And like I do great with babies. I love babies. Newborns, give them to me. I know what to do. Like I'm very confident, but also like I take all the classes. I like get certified. I'm very obsessed. And the parents love it because I am like I thrive, but you know why I thrive, Tom? Because I don't have to talk to adults during the day. They're gone. They hit me up. I text them all the time. They have cameras. They can watch me, but like I don't have adults breathing down my neck. That is a perfect job for somebody like me who like in the babies, they sleep for 5 hours of the day. So the 12-hour shift, they're asleep for like half of it.
Hmm.
It's like the perfect job for somebody on with low spoons who's good with kids. And not a daycare. I'd be overwhelmed and overstimulated. So many noises and textures and smells and like I couldn't do it. But nannying two individual children that you just have to take care of and like foster and work with the families, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So in my head, I'm always thinking like, how do we get you, the individual, into society without asking too much of society, while still figuring out is there a part of society that actually does cater to your needs? And that's kind of my philosophy is like, don't discourage it, encourage it, but try to find a place where you don't have to be such a bitch about it and like demand things of people to change when you are the minority, right? And at the same time, I just think like it's things are more possible than we give ourselves credit for as humans. I think it is possible to have jobs that like adhere to time blindness.
To
And
some extent, they were talking
mhm.
about like reservations at a restaurant, though, right? Like in that case, they probably don't. Isn't that what the girl in the video was saying? Is that they were trying to like set a reservation for a restaurant,
The
or
video I
was it
saw, she said she was
or
trying to
was
get
it
into
an
a
interview?
program. Yeah, it was like a program, and she wondered if she had to be on time for the program's like classes or appointments, and it's if there was leeway for being a little bit late. Which, by the way, it doesn't matter. Like she's allowed to make the request. Like the girls who want $900,000 a year, boys, they're allowed to make the request. And then we as a society don't have to yell at them. Which I think, coming from a family that look, my mother and my father will say my kids are all perfect and God made them this way. There's no such thing as autism, which my sibling has. There's no such thing as ADHD, which my sibling was diagnosed with, and diagnosed with autism. Oh, and there's no such thing as borderline, which I was diagnosed with. All my kids are perfect and God made them all weird and quirky. Okay? So I am used to coming from a bubble where like neurodivergency isn't even a thing. Like you're not allowed to be it. You're just perfect the way you are. So
Mhm.
you do neglect it in school, and then you get into the workforce and you don't know how to function in groups. I'm really lucky that I'm like determined to figure out my life, because otherwise I think I would have failed. Like my sibling who's a teacher will say, like if I was in school now, I would have had an aide because I failed every test in high school, but I passed high school because I cried and begged my teachers. I was like, I don't know what you're teaching me. I was homeschooled my whole life and I only have 2 years of high school I got to complete, and I don't know what I'm doing here. And my teachers would help me, but they only helped me because they knew I was different. Even though none of the paperwork said I was, even though nothing on the book said I was. You know what I mean? So I'm just,
That
again,
makes sense. I had a couple of debates on the time blindness thing. The way that you're explaining it actually makes a bit more sense. Like I, because yeah, if they have an option to where, like, it's not necessary for you to be there 9 to 5, and you have trouble with being on time,
mm,
which I totally understand. I have those issues even today. As much as I tell people to just set alarms and crap like that, I
sure.
still have problems with all of that crap, and so I totally understand that, and I would do best with like a at home, working from my computer sort of thing. And so
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
that makes total sense to me actually.
Yeah. And again, I totally understand the hesitation from people to be like, I have to do it, you have to do it. I also think misery loves company, and I think people get a hard on in the US about
Hmm.
working hard. And so they're like, I suffer, so you have to suffer. I'm like, I don't know. Just like make it easier, right? For the next generation. But I think when you make it easier, they also miss the opportunities of realizing why it was so hard to get there, which is why Gen Z is more anti-LGBT, because they have no memory of why it was so hard to get here in the first place. They have nothing. They have no relationship. All they see is James Charles, and they're like, okay, if James Charles can exist, then gays have had it good. And I'm like, ugh. And so I just think we're like living with different relationships to like how history has worked. You know what I mean? Um, so I can't really fault people that much for being where they're at when it's so easy to be there. It's so easy to be a fan of Andrew Tate, I guess.
Maybe
But it
like I that so this is another thing where I feel like we're kind of missing out on the nuance within the categories. Is like when I'm talking about people, I can explain their perspective pretty well. I can
mm,
empathize with them pretty well. I understand why they believe the things that they do and how they got there. And I like that when I'm saying that I'm like arguing with progressives about like conservatives or Christians or things like that. That seems to be one of the things that we argue about the most, is where they think
mm,
that these are like angry, hateful people just walking around with clenched fists everywhere, just waiting to yell at somebody. Whereas, and then they think of themselves as very different. And so I can totally empathize with these people. I understand who they are, where they're coming from, and all of that. Doesn't mean I agree with them, though. That doesn't mean that I
mm,
agree with them, and that doesn't mean that I'm not going to
right.
advocate for something better. But I can still
Mm.
be accepting of like them, their journey, what they've been through, where they're going, but also be a good influence at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's always the hope, right? I just think we all really disagree on what a good influence is, like what's better for society. Like somebody recently asked me,
That's why debating is good. That's why I love debating, is because I'm going to
mm,
change what I think is good. It's going to be tested nonstop to where, like, if other people are actually making better arguments for what is good or what would be better, then I'm going to have to
mm,
change my position, or my audience is going to think I'm a freaking idiot.
yeah, I I don't think people have very many good I don't think there's very many good arguments is my issue, I think. I think people are deluding themselves into thinking they have a good argument because again, we'd have to like have the conversation of why are we here on this planet? And if it's like we don't know, then there is no reason to do anything except do whatever you want. And then if that's the case, like people can be destructive. But then if you want people to be different, you then have to put a sort of judgment on why we're here in the first place. Are we obligated to be good to each other? Are we obligated to be kind? Like, where does that obligation come from, right? Are we just feeding our own sense of safety when we say we want society to be better?
Well, no, I think the obligation comes from you existing within society. You get all of the benefits of society. You should benefit society as well. It's a give and take process where, like,
Mm,
you're getting so much out of this. You live so much better than the freaking cavemen did. Like,
hmm.
you're part of this system. You need to be a cog within it, and you need to be a cog that actually works and
Mm.
functions correctly.
I agree with that premise, but again, if it's so good, why are we changing it?
We can improve it. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. It's better than other options, but that doesn't mean it's the best. Doesn't mean
I
it's
think that's the
perfect. Like, it's like I said earlier, like, perfection may be impossible, but it's still the goal. Like, we want to keep improving, keep improving. And I do this as an individual as well. Like, I'm always looking for something about myself that's wrong, something that I can improve on, something that I don't like, something that other people don't like, something that I can actually make changes on. And that is like a hard process. Like, it really is. Like, people think I'm a freaking sociopath for picking out individual characteristics about myself and then changing them. And it's like, it is a hard thing to go through, but it's like, I think it's necessary for society to get better, that like individuals have to get better. And just because I had this determined path where I was going to be a pastor and a
mm,
Christian and a Republican and all of these other things, doesn't mean that I had to do that, and I could actually
right.
find something better for myself. And I don't expect that of everybody, but I can expect like incremental changes from them.
For sure. Hold on. I had a thought.
We're talking about bettering
Hmm.
society.
So what will happen is I'll see like older people and they'll say like look at the way the youth is changing society. It worked perfect the way before, right?
Hmm.
But it didn't work for us. And I think every time we make a change, it hurts somebody else. And I think I live in a reality where like every change you make hurts somebody. So you have to then make the decision of like what change could we make that hurts the least amount of people? And I think it's probably the change of again giving people the way out, maybe live and let live.
Well, it's
And I
also
think again
prioritizing things as well. It's not just
mm,
like one or the other. Either it's going to hurt them or it's not going to hurt them. It's prioritizing, like, does their pain matter as much as these other people's pain? Like,
mm,
for trans people, they are such a small group of people in the United States, and they are having such a dramatic effect. So many people are freaking out about what's happening in the kids' classrooms, what's happening in their
totally.
bathrooms, what's happening in locker rooms, and they probably have never seen a trans person their entire life outside of
Yeah.
television and the internet, right? These
Right,
people
right.
are having such a dramatic effect. But the inconsistency within our morals, where we're supposed to be accepting of people and allow them to live their lives the way that they want to, like, that is the problem that we're trying to address, where we're being
Mm,
inconsistent with trans people. Because if we allow that inconsistency, we're going to allow it in a bunch of other areas as well. So we need to kind of snuff out the inconsistencies, like with trans people, even though there's more people suffering from the changes that we're making for trans people's benefit. It's not just for their benefit, it's for the benefit of society's overall morals and
mm.
values as well.
Yeah, I think that's the hard argument to make, right? Because if people belong in like a religious bubble, then there's only one version of that religion. If they're staunch religious people, then there's like a book you follow, or there's like a dogma you follow, or there's like a something you follow, a Quran, something that tells you how to be. maybe you're Orthodox Jewish and you don't do like electricity on Saturdays. So they want to move you in that direction. And I think that's the issue we're always going to find is why do people think they have the right to move people in a direction? Where does that come from?
I mean, I'm going to move people in a direction whether I choose to or not. Like, I'm going to be an influence on other people around me, whether I choose to be or not. As long as I'm around people, I will be influencing them and they will be influencing me. And so you just make a choice as to whether or not you want to be a good influence or a bad influence, or just ignore it and just hope for the best. Like, those are kind of your only options. And I choose to be a good influence and choose to actually think about these things, find the utility in it, find the way to where I'm actually like going to better people's lives in some way.
Okay, I want to ask you a question, and I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to actually use it as an example, and I don't mind being a punching bag myself. So, why do you think that it was? Why didn't you ever reach out to me? Like, do you think you were causing me positive energy when people were coming to my chats and saying like things about me, or like saying things about me in your comment sections about how I'm deluded or crazy, or and do you think that's like causing more positive or harm? Like, do you think that you just having an opinion about me that encouraged people to think I was not worthy of being seen was like good? Like, why didn't you ever reach out to me?
I did.
Really?
Actually.
When? Did you email me?
No.
Did I email you?
No, so my head mod, my producer, she's the one who like gives me everything that I review, that I watch. She's been a big fan of you for a while. She started telling me, she's like, hey, I love this Brittany Simon girl. You got to go talk to her. You guys would have such interesting conversations. So I watched you for like a month or so, and I was in your chat. One day you saw me and you're like, I love that name. A bunch of people were like, yeah, he's got a channel. You went and pulled up my channel for a minute. So there was a day where I said something like, hey, I'd love to have you on sometime. Like, we were just talking for me in chat, and your response was something that actually like kind of pissed me off. So you said,
what was it?
You said, thanks, but I'm very picky about the types of people that I collaborate with. And I was like,
remember. You're right. I do remember that. My bad.
My goodness.
Do you want to know? Do you want to know my thought process? You're fucking right. That is true. That happened. Do you want to know why?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you want to know why I'm reaching out to people now? I'll tell you.
Because I definitely noticed when you reached out to me, I thought, she's like around now out of nowhere. This is different.
Totally fucking forgot that happened. Okay, let me tell you. So, first of all, I'm sorry. That was my bad. Because you're right. You did reach out, and I apparently rejected you and totally fucking forgot. I was salty
about it too. I was in like I remember being in other people's chats. Like Cherry was like, "Oh, I think I'm gonna go talk to. I'm gonna reach out to Brittany and see if she wants to chat." And I'm like, "Nah, don't even try. She's picky about the people she collaborates."
Shut up. Okay, I'll tell you why. Okay, so I've had a lot of like moments with YouTubers, right? I've talked to ContraPoints. I've talked to like all these like famous fucking YouTubers are all do shoe on head. Like I've collabed with all these people. They're all fucking pains in the ass because they all ghost. They're all fucking pussies, and none of them know how to have conversations. And so when I came back into the sphere and I reached out to Destiny, which was, by the way, the first time I collabed with people I didn't really know in a long time, and I was really encouraged by a viewer of mine. She's like, "Please do this, please do this." And look, that fucking burned up too. The fucking bitch. Like everyone is so fucking emotional on the internet, and I don't want it to be that way. Just talk to me, but like talk to me in a way that's reasonable, right? So like I don't know how to do that on the internet. So at the time you reached out to me, or anyone was, I was getting a lot of DMs from people, and I was like, no. I was feeling so overwhelmed, and I was like, I can't trust anybody. I don't know who anybody is. I don't know who anyone is. And so I was kind of trusting Destiny to put me in contact with people that I could like vibe with. And I knew Cherry from him, which by the way was a mistake because she caused the rumor that happened a few months ago that wasn't even true. And like, oh, and this person was cool. Kyla's awesome. I like her. I'm glad we connected. Mr. Girl was a mess. That was a mistake. Like, you know what I mean? And all these things started happening. And so I was just so defensive at the time, and I was already going through so much that I was like, So that was, oh my God, that is, I remember that day, Tom. I remember answering you that way. See how fucked up I am? I'm such a bitch.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's so funny.
And I'll admit, like I was salty about it too. Like I was salty about it, and I was like, okay, I see how it is. Like I'm not cool enough, or I'm not good enough. I get it. That's fine.
I'm fucking overwhelmed.
I'm literally thinking, I'm like, okay, so she'll talk to Mr. Girl, she'll talk to Cherry, she'll talk to like all of these, Lav, and I'm the one who's like not cool enough. Yeah, I'm level 1. I get it. That
That is so fucking funny. Shit. No. Like, and that's my problem. I am my bad judge of character. I can't decide on the internet. The internet confuses me. I have a really hard time with internet stuff because I'm like, you're cool, you're cool, you're okay, not cool. Are we fighting? What's happening? And then I get overwhelmed. Like I got so overwhelmed during that Destiny thing. I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? And I was like so confused. And then like when you know stuff behind the scenes, you're like, we can't talk about this on the internet. Am I being too stupid about this? And then I'm just like always, I get so much anxiety. So yeah, I'm trying to open myself up. I contacted Wick. I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to be on a panel, which by the way, gives me so much fucking anxiety. But I think I killed it yesterday and I had fun. And then I was like, okay, I'll talk to Tom and I'll talk to this person. And I was like, I'm gonna do it now. And so I've been practicing like with certain people, I already have like a good vibe with them, so it's easier. But with like new people, even before today, I was like, okay. I was like, okay, I got this. And then once the stream starts, I feel better. But the insane amount of anxiety I have before I go live every day or every time I go live is like neurotic. It's like so stupid, but I feel that. So that's funny. Fuck.
I'm glad you brought it up. I was gonna ask at some point if like what you know of my content or of my reviews of you, because I was doing okay, because yeah, that's funny.
Fuck, I had seen, you know why? Can I be honest about why I end up seeing your content? It's because like you'll tag me and I'll see it. It will come up on my YouTube feed. They're like, Tom talked about you. And I'm like, oh. Yeah, that's YouTube. They'll tell you. So I
no, Sassafras is like my my mod who told me to come talk to you. So yeah, she goes and does like the timestamps afterwards, and she'll tag creators that I'm reviewing and everything. So yeah,
that's why I got tagged. So this last time I got tagged, I'm sitting on the bed, and my boyfriend is like, "What are you listening to?" I was like, "There's this guy Tom, and I know him sometimes, but I don't really know him. But like, but like he's talking about me." And I feel a way about it. And he's like, "Do you want to talk to him?" I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Why?" And I was like, I think it'll be good. And that's it. That's all I know. Is like in the moment, I don't even know why. I'm just like, I think it will be good. And like that's why I do it.
So I was surprised, like I said, I was surprised that you would reach out to me because yeah, I was like pretty like I'm normally pretty aggressive in my reviews and the way that I like review stuff, but I'm not in conversations, and so I don't know, like I like talking to people that think very differently from me and that I'm going to disagree with. And so like I always make a concerted effort to really get along with people that I'm going to have a lot of disagreements with, because those are the conversations that I enjoy the most. So
no, for sure. And like I'm still getting used to this space. I remember when I entered it, Destiny would be like, get on a panel, get on a panel. I was like, guys, I don't know how to debate. I get really overwhelmed. Everyone's like yelling. I don't know how to do this. I just want to have a conversation. And I think that was what I felt from your energy the other day, even though you were criticizing me. Something about the way you talked, like your tone was very much like this is, I'm gonna imitate it probably poorly, but you were like, I just don't see where the nuance is, and it felt like exhausted. And I was like, oh, he's exhausted. I can talk to him.
I was frustrated, yes.
Like I was like, okay, maybe we can have a conversation, which I think has gone incredibly well. Like now that we've done it, but yeah, I get incredibly overwhelmed. Even Wick had been asking me forever to come on panels. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm not built for this. Like, I can't do this. I'm overwhelmed. And then I told myself, okay, not only am I take my job more seriously, but I'm going to make a concerted effort to explain my ideas to people, because apparently I'm not doing it well enough. And so these kind of conversations do help for sure. Fuck, I am sorry that I can't believe I didn't put it together when I just fucking emailed you and I didn't even put it together that we had that conversation. But of course I remember that day. Like I do remember it.
That's weird that you remember that, because yeah, you were kind of just like,
you know, what I remember is I have a hard time even with my audience. Like there are people who've been on my Discord for like years and I don't know what they look like. And everyone's like, Brittany, they've shared photos. I was like, I need to see it like a lot. So I remember the text, like when you're talking, I can see the chat log in my head and I can see your username and I can see myself in my chair responding that way to you. And I'm like, oh, I have that in my head. Yeah, I know that. I know. I
see logos. Like I tell everybody all the time, I don't see y'all's names. I see your logos. And then when you guys change your names, I think of you as a completely different person.
Totally throws me off. Like my audience, I like know them, but sometimes they'll change their names. I was like, don't do this to me. Don't. And sometimes I won't even pronounce their names in my head. I'll just see the way it's spelled. And I'm like, that's their name.
Yep.
Okay, this makes me feel so, I gotta go back and like remind myself of how many, if you're listening and I've rejected a collab with you, I might be able to do it now. Maybe. It is like literally midnight my time. And so even that, I'm 9 hours ahead of y'all. like Pacific time, 6 hours ahead of Eastern. I
Hmm.
have to get used to that too. Like, okay, we're gonna collab, which means we're gonna promise to be somewhere, which means we're gonna have to be up in the middle of the night to do it.
Yeah,
So
because
I'm,
you said
yeah.
the time difference. That's the only reason I said 3 o'clock. Normally, I will never get on at three
I
o'clock. I get
appreciate
on
it.
at like 11 o'clock. So
Okay, is that because of your job or something?
yeah, I work during the day, and then I get home, like shower, eat, and then get on
Yeah.
stream and stream like into the early morning. And so yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm curious too, if you don't mind me asking, like what do you stream now? Like before you said you had this purpose, but like what is it now that keeps you streaming? Because like it's a very big dedication to work all day and then come home and stream.
Mhm. Yeah, initially I started podcasting, just because I
Ah.
wanted to be able to talk to people. I wanted to have interesting conversations. Um, and then the more I started realizing that I was wrong and started changing on things, and like, I saw this like, oh, this is actually like a new alley for self improvement. Like, this is a new
Mm-hmm.
way for me to like, because I did not see that at all. I saw me just like being able to understand different perspectives, because all I ever heard was like, Ben Shapiro and Stefan Molyneux and all of these guys talking about what the left believes, but I didn't
Yeah.
actually, I thought that's so insane. There's no way people can actually believe this. I got to talk to some of these
Yeah.
people and try to understand it. And so, yeah, instead of it just being an understanding, it turned into me like actually changing my beliefs pretty dramatically, obviously, from being far right to where I'm at today. Like,
Yeah.
and not being a Christian anymore, that was a radical change.
That's
And
big.
so, yeah, like and that was only, I've been streaming for maybe 2.5 to 3 years, and I'm still making pretty radical, dramatic changes in my thought processes and my beliefs. And so, I'm still making a lot of improvements. I enjoy doing it. It's fun. I would like to do it as a career one day if I can continue growing.
Yeah.
And this is like, I'm a creative person, and I like to like, I really enjoy the process of streaming and editing and making video essays and all of that stuff. And so, like, yeah, I enjoy all of this, and I would like to be able to do it full time one day if that's in the cards.
Absolutely. I mean, gosh, everybody knows it took me like 12 years to even make enough money to do it full time. Like, it took me so long of making content and working two jobs and coming home and just making content and trying to make it work. And so it is definitely like for me, it's always going to be worth it. You know what I mean? But it is like you gotta love it. I don't even know why I come back to it sometimes. I'm like, why do I love this job?
Hmm.
But it is like I think I'm obsessed with the interpersonal dynamics and the conversations and the back and forth.
It's
I think there's
addicting.
just something
I've
about it. Oh my
literally,
gosh.
yes, I've
Yeah.
literally said this numerous times over the last couple of weeks. Is like, I'm exhausted right now, but I'm on here anyways because I'm addicted to
Mm.
this crap. And so here I
Yeah.
am talking to you losers at like 1 in the morning. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, wait, there's something. Oh, you know what's cool about how much you've changed on the internet is like I think about if you go a lot of my videos are private now because they're cringe as fuck, but like I've changed so much and it's all documented. Like I have videos I can go back and reference, be like, oh my gosh. Like sometimes I'll show my audience, I was like, this is this Brittany. Oh, this is Brittany when she was doing this. Oh, this is Brittany. And like look at all these past Brittany's who got me here. So grateful. But like you have that. You've radically changed and
It's
it's
all still there
documented.
too. Yeah, it's all
Really,
still
you've
there.
kept
Yeah,
it up.
it's all there. Yeah.
Amazing.
Like
That's
even the
amazing.
the first podcast, all of those things. It's all here on the channel. I'll tell you, when I searched your name, so after you reached out to me, I thought, okay, I gotta like look and see if there's like stuff she's talked about on this topic before. When I searched your name, and I don't want to like hit something,
Oh.
but the
Mm.
first thing that popped up was somebody saying that you're accusing them of being your stalker, and that was like the first
Mm.
3 videos that popped up was from this
Mm.
person with your
Yeah.
name in the
Yeah.
title. So
She was. But she's a scammer stalker. She's got like 12 victims. We all took her to court. It was a big mess. She's just, I think, incredibly mentally ill, but hurts a lot of people. Don't interact with her. I'll tell you this right now. Every person who interacts with her, she eventually accuses of sex trafficking or rape. Every single person. Every YouTuber who's interacted with her, every person. She even infiltrated the Seattle scene when I was in it and made friends with people and accused them in local communities. And I think she probably has like a slew of a lot of mental illnesses. And I used to really wish ill on this person, but genuinely, I know this sounds crazy, but she is like a one, right? And she won't eat the cupcake. She won't let society help her. And I like, good luck, girl. good luck. Like I can't help, like you can't help those who can't be helped, right? Like, and she
Mhm.
can't be helped the moment she makes the decision, but she just like refuses to. And it is what it is. Like I think enough of the families who have been hurt by her, we all have to live with those memories, but at least we're not her.
Mhm.
And I have to like take solace in that.
Well, I'll tell you, so lots of like, I think initially you reaching out to me, normally my first, like my debate brain immediately thinks like, oh, fun, I get like somebody to destroy, this will be good content, like this will be fun. But looking into your stuff, like I watched your video on levels, I watched your video on bubbles, like, yeah, I was like, oh no, like I agree with this stuff. Like people meme about all of this and think it's all like,
it's quite memeable.
Yes, it's they, but
Can I say,
but
I
it's
love the
actually
memes,
like
though.
good stuff. Like I agree with a
Thank you,
lot
I
of this.
appreciate
I like I said, I don't agree with like categorizing it or saying that it's not a hierarchy, but
Sure.
I do agree with the like the details of it, the way you talk about it, the way that you talk about introspecting. Like I
appreciate that.
definitely agree with all of this stuff, and so I thought like I had like a newfound respect for you going through these videos and really enjoyed them. Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate that. Honestly, that's what I mean to say. Like, I know I asked my brother this. I called him the other day. I was like, so am I unlikable? And he's like, oh, you're like likable, unlikable. I was like, what does this mean? He goes, people either hate you or they like you. And I was like, how do I get the, like, how do I transfer it over? Like, to get, because I don't want people to think I want ill for them, but I also want to defend myself. You know, when that girl came at me, I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I was like, none of this is true. She like accused me of sex trafficking her, and it was a whole thing after like I can't even the story is insane. But I didn't know what to do with that. I was like, what do I do with this information? Like how do I combat this lie, right? Like how do I do that, right? She's very believable. She like does her whole shtick. She has like a whole shtick she does. And I'm like, how do I combat this? And it really came down to like, am I willing to face such horrendous like misunderstandings of who I am. Like what was that website, Kiwi Farms? I was like all over Kiwi Farms, like people had all these blogs about me, and I was like none of this is true. But what can I say that is true? And I just said what was true, and it made it easier, and I think people picked up on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I made a choice to be online, and I made a choice to be here, and I made a choice to be misunderstood. Like being a content creator is making a choice to be misunderstood. Because there's no way I can speak universally to everybody. Like I'm curious if I can poke at it because my audience is poking at it a little bit. How's your audience reacting to me? Are they doing okay?
They're freaking crazy. I keep telling them to chill. They're all a bunch of freaking nutcases.
Like that's interesting, right? Like we're getting along. You would think
Mhm.
our kids would get along.
Yeah.
But how do we do that? How do we bridge those community gaps? You know what I'm saying? And I don't know if it's always like there is a path to it, but I think being misunderstood is a part of the journey of being a content creator. And so like I made the decision after her to like be misunderstood if that was the case. But I would try my hardest to have these conversations when I had the energy. So I'm grateful too that you said yes because I wasn't sure you would. I reached out and I was so glad to hear back from you, but like maybe you wouldn't have, right? Like you didn't have any obligation to talk to me.
Well, that's the thing is that after the first time, I never would have like reached out to you again or tried again. So I was glad that you reached out and that you commented it. I immediately sent it, took a screenshot, sent it to Sassafras. She was so happy. She's like, yes, years in the making. It's finally happening. So yeah,
I appreciate that energy from her too.
Out. Yeah.
She manifested it, I swear.
And you have a lot of fans in my audience. Like, don't get me wrong. Like a bunch of these people watch you pretty regularly. I've been watching your chat the whole time. They're super cool. They've been awesome. So yeah, my chat's just freaking schizo.
Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate it, honestly. Good energy, my bro. Now, is there anything else, since it's a little bit at that time for me, is there anything else you want to chat about, or should we just pick another time to talk, which I'm open to?
Yeah, no, I don't think I have much else. There were like notes that I took on some of the other, like when I said that like I disagreed with like the over categorizing of things. Most of the time I really like analyzing things on a language basis because I think almost everything that we interact with is only there because we've categorized it as such, and now we think about it through that lens. And a lot of the like categorizations of things that you use, I think sometimes is over categorizing to where it's missing the nuance, it's missing the spectrum, it's missing the lines in between. And so those are like other things that I think would be interesting to talk about at some point. But yeah, I'm always open. You got me on Discord, so you can hit me up anytime.
Anytime.
Most of the time, people, I like my show's fairly similar to Destiny's, where like I sit in a Discord and people just kind of pop on while I'm talking about a certain
I'll join
subject.
your Discord.
and
Yeah, you send
hang
me a
out.
link.
Yeah, I sent you a link. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
cool.
yeah.
I'll just hop in.
Cool.
Okay, that
All
sounds
right.
great. Thank you so much for being here, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Brittany. Have a good one.
Okay, you too.